Welcome back to the Orthodox Ethos, and we have had some technical problems, and I can see now that my camera is also super zoomed in. Not sure what that's all about, so sorry about that. We've had to change a number of things just to get this live from going. It's probably because the topic is so explosive and about the demonic in our day, so there has to be some kind of technical problems involved in it. All right, we're going to be right back in a moment for a little monologue, and then we're going to have our guest on in just a few moments. So stay tuned for an amazing exploration of the ascending Babylon in transhumanism. Well, I'm glad you're joining us tonight for this special interview that we're going to have in a moment with our good friend David Patrick Harry and his new book, Return to Babylon. Before we jump into that and have a wonderful discussion, as we've had on his channel a number of times, and I'm looking forward to it, I wanted to share just briefly an experience I had yesterday, which is so interesting. And it kind of dovetails nicely into our topic tonight. It was hard to kind of explain all the details behind it. It's not important. What's important is I ended up in a discussion that lasted several hours with a Jewish rabbi, a Reformed Jewish rabbi, which I don't think I've ever had a discussion with a Reformed Jewish rabbi before. So this was a first. And I was discussing a certain private, personal topic about a certain friend. And I was asked to intercede and et cetera, et cetera. But what I learned, which it's, you know these things theoretically through books, but when you actually sit down and you talk to someone who is purporting to represent Reformed Judaism, and you have a chance to discuss things, and you talk with people who are in that environment, what was educational for me was just how far, how progressive, how extensive the total alienation from what I could see from what we understood or think we know is Judaism. In other words, the image that we have from the scriptures, from the ancient Old Testament period, what we think we know of Judaism in terms of just the images and things we have, perhaps so-called Orthodox Judaism. But what I encountered was total and utter New Age relativism, perennialism. All religions lead to God. We are already gods. There's no need to repent for sin. Sin is not our problem because it's just becoming better people. I mean, just unbelievably shocking for me just how eviscerated what passes, at least for this particular rabbi. And he said, well, pretty much anything goes in contemporary Judaism. So there's not, this idea that there's some kind of orthodoxy or some kind of standard or some kind of dogmatic framework. It really is pick and choose, create your own version. It's a cultural, it's a family that you join. It's traditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was extremely eye-opening for me just to see how far gone. Now, I'm sure there's a wide spectrum, a great variety of incarnations of what people think is Judaism. But it is certainly to a great degree among most, I would say, in the Western world, in America, which I think the vast majority of them are in the Reformed camp, or at least conservative camp, not in the Orthodox camp. It is not at all mistaken to say that these two religions, if you can even call what he presented to me, are not the same at all. And what was confirmed for me is also in his whole cosmotheoria that he presented to me was that there is a far more impact than I probably had imagined of Kabbalah among the trickling down to even the more secular Jews. Because what he was talking about when he was talking about essentially perennialism and the religion of the future has to have its roots in the Kabbalah and the really satanic origins of that entire outlook. And so these things have become mainstream. And so what I was encountering was people trying to talk to a certain person about Christ because they were talking about leaving Christ and going to Judaism. And what I was encountering was a wall of total and utter relativism. It was the only offensive thing you could say to them was there is truth and you're leaving it. That was and of course the feelings of everyone in the room. So our feelings were paramount, and then the idea that there's truth was anathema. And any kind of need to conform to anything but except what I want, that was on display. And of course, you kind of know that but it's different to experience it firsthand. It was really an eye-opening experience for me, but not surprising either. I wasn't blown away, but I guess I was impacted by the dogmatic nature of relativism, which is really phenomenal. Because again, you are really disgusting. I mean, that's directed toward me or to the Orthodox faith, because you insist that there is a truth. He was incarnate, and we have to actually follow him and obey him. And if you leave him, you leave God. There were a number of people in the room who were not Jews. There was a Roman Catholic. There were others. But what was mostly common was whatever happens, even if you leave Christ, you're not leaving God. And when I said, well, actually, no, that's not true. When you leave Christ, you leave God. That was like, are you okay? Are you sure? Are you not maybe mentally impaired? What age are you from? You had this sense that these people, Orthodox, you must be from either planet Mars or certainly 600 years ago, because who thinks like you? Now, they didn't say that, but that was the, if you took the temperature of the room, you'd get that 107 degrees. So maybe that's helpful tonight. I think for me, I'm coming into this discussion tonight with this expert, I would say, in the field of transhumanism and the whole theological, philosophical background. And he's going to help us. He's going to help us talk about the roots of it, the expression of it today, and its relation to Orthodox Christianity. I'm very excited about it. So let's bring him on, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it. Let me see if we can get this to the stage. How you doing? Welcome, David. It's good to see you.
Father Peter, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was wonderful to finally meet in person too, down at the Athens and Jerusalem conference in Palm Coast.
One of the highlights for me was your talk. And our discussion together at the table, and just the ability to actually see people in person, which was one of the highlights for me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I thought the conference went well.
Yes, absolutely. People were asking me about it. The best thing about it is we get to dwell together, as it says in the scriptures, in unity, brotherly love, and face to face. Internet's great, but it's much better in person.
Absolutely.
To say the least.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us tonight on the Orthodox Ethos. I think there's a lot of people here very excited about our discussion. You are by far the expert. I've given a talk on transhumanism, but I did not do a PhD. I did not spend years poring over the text. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you tonight and bringing some of connecting the philosophy, theology, history to what we're hearing and seeing right now in social media, right now on Tucker Carlson, right now in front of us. That's what's going to be exciting, because one of the things that has been so liberating in Orthodoxy, and especially in the writings of Father Seraphim Rose, for me, has been the ability to see the Alpha and the Omega,
right,
and then understand where we are in that whole process. And what it does immediately is that, first of all, it orients you, which is what we have to be oriented to Christ. We have to be oriented to the truth. Otherwise, we're in big trouble spiritually. But it gives you a great amount of peace, and it gives you a great amount of ability to make sense of everything. And I think one of the tricks of the devil is to keep us constantly dizzy, distracted, overwhelmed, bad news every day. I mean, if you want bad news every day, you've got tons of it, right? Just get on Twitter for about 30 seconds and you can just fall into depression with the amount of disintegration and confusion, so to speak. So this is going to be a very good discussion for a lot of reasons. So where should we start? Except give us some background. First of all, just 2 words about yourself. Most people,
Okay.
everybody know who's here tonight is going to know who you are, what you're doing. You got a great podcast over there, and tell us about the podcast. Tell about your work there, and just briefly about yourself, and then we'll jump into the book, which is just out.
So my name is Dr. David Patrick Harry. I just finished my PhD, which is really what this book is. It's essentially a dissertation repackaged as a book. I have a YouTube channel, Church of the Eternal Logos, which is basically, it's not a church. All the people that hate Orthodox always accuse me of trying to start some skits. It's not a church. The idea is, when I started it, to look at cultural context, historical events through the lens of Logos theology of the Orthodox Church. So it's Church of the Eternal Logos. It's whatever topic we're looking basically through the lens of Orthodoxy. And I'll be launching an old YouTube channel that I basically have taken all the content down. I used to promote psychedelics before I found Christ again, before I converted to Orthodoxy. The beginning of my PhD program was actually focused on psychedelics. And the dissertation, the PhD, was actually going to be on looking at inebriating substances and its history as its own sort of new neo-spiritual movement. However, one of my advisors on my PhD committee said, that little section you had about transhumanism, that seems more apropos to really describe as a new religious movement. I think you should scrap basically a year's worth of work, and you should reframe your dissertation as focusing on transhumanism. So the PhD then is essentially comparing transhumanism and theosis. Now you might think, well, that seems like kind of an odd framework. The idea is that transhumanism is really the alternate competing narrative of deification in the contemporary world. And so I mentioned this at the conference, and even people at the conference, actually somebody interrupted my speech to say I was overblowing the importance of transhumanism and that nobody actually thinks these things or cares about this stuff. The irony is the elites do. So I would agree the average person on the street probably isn't anxiously anticipating their new Neuralink. However, when you look at the investment, you look at the Stargate project of Donald Trump, the first month with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman of ChatGPT, that's a $500 billion project so that America will win the AI race, essentially this race towards what they believe to be AGI, Advanced General Intelligence. So anyways, I'm getting too far already into the book.
Yeah.
I just have a YouTube channel. I have another YouTube channel, Dr. David Patrick Harry, and I have a men's academy called Logos Academy over on school.com, where you were mentioned Father and Sarah from Rose. We're getting ready next Wednesday. We're going to begin moving through the Orthodox survival course, 3 chapters at a time. And so that's a men's only community. Sorry.
3 chapters at a time. Wow. That's going to be ambitious. I did 1 at a time and it was tough. So.
Okay. Well, we haven't dove into it yet. So it may slow down to a 1 chapter pace, but we meet every 2 weeks.
You can cover it at any depth you want, but yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
So that's who I am. That's enough to summarize.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're excited about the book. Now, before we even get too much further in, tell us how people can obtain the book. I'm assuming I told them at your website. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at my website, I only sell hard copies, and those are signed. And if there's something in particular you want me to write or as a message, you can put that in the message when you check out on my website. It is a little bit more expensive. It helps me make a little bit more money on each book. But if you want it cheaper, if difficult times right now in the economy, you can go to Amazon. So if you just put in Return to Babylon, it'll pop up. Return to Babylon, Adam from Antichrist. Or if you just put in David Patrick Harry, it'll pop up. And they have there's a Kindle version and then a paperback and a hardback.
Well, we want to support you, and so I encourage everybody to go to the website and get the book from you and get the signed copy and have the hardcover. It's always better to have the hardcover, and you're gonna be able to mark it up. You're gonna be able to carry it around. So Let's hope people do that and support your publishing. Hopefully, it's the first of many books.
Yes.
So you and I have talked about this in the past. We did a live stream on it. I know a few things. But here I'm looking at the table of contents here, and you've gone a lot deeper than anything I ever did. I was just basically, I was focusing on what I thought was the most important theological point, and I think that I'm sure you delve into this deeply, and that is that, look, it is transparently obvious here to an unbelievable degree, and so I'm getting told we have mic problems. I don't know why. I have a different browser, so the browser doesn't have the same ability to do the mic, but this is the mic that I have, and you're telling me that it's not working, huh? Yeah, I can't do anything. I'm trying to figure out if there's something I can do to better the mic, but I really don't. I really can't, fortunately. This is it. So we're gonna have to live with the mic for tonight. We had to get in. The only thing I can do is get out and come back in on a different browser. Let me see if I can do that, and that should solve the problem. So bear with me for a moment when I do that, once I get the other browser going, because I think it's a browser issue, unfortunately. So, but I don't know what's going on. I can't even get the browser open. So we'll just have to run with it.
I can hear you. I mean, it does sound like it's a general mic, maybe not that, but it's totally legible.
Okay. All right. It's legible. Well, if we get the other browser,
I'm just a little bit louder. It does sound like you're further away from a mic.
Yeah. So maybe it's not this. Maybe it's not this. I mean, you don't hear me on this one? No,
I do not. I don't think that one's. You could check the setting.
Let me see. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I don't see any other reason to believe that that's not it. I don't know. It's very strange. Yeah, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. Technical problems. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. This is full throttle here. Yeah. So we'll just have to run with it. So until I get the other browser going, maybe that's the issue. I'm not sure. So what I delved into was the theological core, which is this is just a repeat, and it's kind of unbelievably. To me, it's unbelievable how transparent it is. In other words, the people who are running with this, pushing transhumanism, it's as if they know, maybe you're going to tell me, they know just how obvious they're repeating the temptation of the serpent in the garden. The lie, you will become gods without God. It's so obvious to anybody who has a little literacy in biblical theology, cosmology, demonology, that they're just running with it. And when I saw recently, I saw an interview with a guy from Hollywood who was doing research into the roots of AI, and the guy he was talking about as kind of the father of AI was known to be, and he accepted the fact that he had 3 demons in him, and he was getting basically told by the demons how to do this thing. Right. Did you ever see that interview with this guy? I don't know who he was.
No, I haven't seen that interview.
It's wild. It's Tucker Carlson, and this guy, I don't know, what he brings to the table as far as his credentials, but he was saying some names. He was dropping big names in the AI world, and Silicon Valley, and I'm thinking to myself, they're not. He said they're not like, oh, I'm sorry, it's weird that we're actually listening to the demons. It was like, yeah, this is cool. No problem. In other words, what I talked about earlier in my intro, that there's no dogmatic consciousness. It's total utter relativism, no truth. It seems that these people are in the same world in a way, that they're not cognizant of just how transparently satanic their program is. Now, I don't mean to jump to the conclusion, but that was what I was focusing on. That, look, this is the temptation in the garden. Now I want to hear you tell me about how we got there, or a lot more that you've done. But is that a part of your book? Is that a part of your research?
Yeah. Well, actually, I quote and reference you in chapter 4. There was a piece, because you did your thing on transhumanism. There's an article that I found on Orthodox Ethos, because I was searching any clergy. I was desperate to find Orthodox clergy speaking on the topic so I could quote them. And yours was one that I quote, I think, in the first and second sections in chapter 4. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned, are these people conscious of the satanic inversion? I would say some of them are. And some of them use it as just a semiotic reference. So Max Moore, who's considered one of the founding philosophers of transhumanism, he developed a philosophy called extropy, meaning their transhumanism and his endeavors are against the entropy of the universe. And therefore, it's this trajectory towards ultimate life. And he wrote an article called In Praise of the Devil, where he basically takes it's kind of like a juvenile 16-year-old atheist perspective, where he's, the God of Christianity is mean, he's vindictive, he prevents us from becoming illuminated and enlightened, and therefore he refers to Lucifer, Satan, and the devil all as a sort of Promethean hero. But he then says, well, of course, I don't believe these things have ontological existence. But the mimetic power is that we need to incorporate Satan and Lucifer as a way so that people can see transhumanism as a liberating light. And when I was living in Berkeley, which is not far from the Silicon Valley, we actually had a class on new religious movements and Western esoteric traditions. And we were to find local representations of these faiths. And one of the women who was also a co-PhD student with me, she was a Thelemite. So that means she's part of the Temple of Thelema, which is the tradition founded by Aleister Crowley. And one of the things that I came to become aware of that I was not aware of is how popular the occult is among Silicon Valley. It was actually the most popular form of spirituality, was a mixture between New Age and explicit occult or esoteric ritual practice. And so when the people were interested in spirituality, it definitely wasn't returning back to an Orthodox phronum or anything that's traditional. There was a great excitement about incorporating esoteric rituals and a sort of secularized context that they reincorporate as a form of self-power. They're re-empowering themselves. Now, of course, the power that they claim to have is obviously a demonic influence. But there's also traditions that are explicitly religious within transhumanism. I talked about the Terrorism trans religion, which was founded by Martine Rothblatt. She's a transgender woman, so it's a biological man, founder of Sirius Satellite Radio, all this different stuff. And they have headquarters in Florida. And if you went there, they basically have icons on the wall, but it's all people like Hans Moravec and Ray Kurzweil and Peter Thiel and these type of individuals, because of the technological contributions they've made. They believe that they're paving the way for this utopian world. And so I question, because, and we can get into some of the philosophy behind transhuman, why they even think that this thing is possible, because the entire enterprise of transhumanism is built on a theoretical understanding of mind, which is it's not like the philosophy of mind has come to a new conclusion, a new turn in philosophy where this is a cornerstone truth. No, they take the theory that functionalism is the case. And functionalism basically just argues that if something can perform the same function as a human brain, it has a functional equivalence. So a calculator can do 2 + 2 = 4. You can do that in your brain. The calculator then has a functional equivalence, or at least regarding that project or that endeavor. And so the idea then for them, as long as the machine can output and function the same as a human brain, it is equivalently the same thing. That's their argument. And therefore, if they can build, this is their belief, enough interconnections within the AI system, the emergent phenomenon will be a sort of sentience, because that's what they believe happens in us, is that the neurons become so interconnected. And from a child until you reach like self-awareness, that what is happening is that the information of the environment is causing the neuronal connections to eventually emerge into the experience that I have the sense of I'm a self and I am a thinking thing. And they believe that that's exactly what the machine's going to do. Now,
so just let me stop you a minute. So the total materialists, and yet they have a occult aspect, some of them. So how do they square that?
Well, some of them are explicit. So like William Sims Bainbridge, he's actually a sociologist. If you take if you go to university and do like a sociology 101, he'll be one of the people that you'll probably read one of his books. Well, he is a transhumanist, and he's very much in favor of of transhumanism. And they are explicitly talking about how transhumanists, they need to incorporate occult, spirit, new age spiritual elements to surround it so that it truly can supplant religion as it exists today. And for them, it's not even that you have to do this major conversion. They just want you to assume the transhuman eschatology within your spiritual worldview. And so I don't know if you saw last week, Joe Rogan did an interview. Joe Rogan's now going to a Christian church somewhere around Austin. It's some type of, rock band entertainment experience, but he's talking about how much he likes it, how he likes the people. And then in the next sentence talks about how, yeah, I believe, Jesus was born of a virgin. I think that the AI, when it becomes sentient, that is the second coming of Jesus. And that's exactly what transhumanists actually want and what they think is going to occur. It doesn't matter if you're a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, is that the AI and what they believe the teleology of where it's going is the fulfillment. It's the tactile fulfillment of religion itself. They believe all mythology is sort of wishful human imagination. But what they're building is something that you can actually touch. And so they are instantiating the thing that all religion and all mythology have been speculating about or desiring. That's the way that they would perceive it, is that this is sort of the fanciful desire of human transcendence. And what they're offering is the actual thing. And so they don't care where you're coming from. They think they can blend it all into it. And so one of the ironies is that Mormonism was the very first religion, I think, as early as like 1997 to found their own Mormon Transhumanist Association. And Lincoln Cannon, so he's the sort of head of that, he believes that to be Mormon is to be transhuman, but to be transhuman doesn't necessarily mean that you're Mormon. And he argues that Mormon theology itself insinuates, because, for them, God the Father was an entity that evolved into divinity, that they then, and every Mormon is on that same trajectory, right? It's a concept of deification, and technology is something that can be used in that process. That transhumanism then is the fulfillment of Mormon theology. That's his argument. And there's people there in Tennessee, actually in Nashville, there's what's called the Christian Transhumanist Association. Now, these people are like non-denominational Protestants, but they have been putting on conferences in the last 5 years or so with Aubrey de Grey. He's the longevity researcher. He's been on Joe Rogan before. And they are trying to incorporate Christianity and argue that transhumanism is the fulfillment of us getting to the millennial kingdom. And as we'll get into the specifics of my book, chapter 1 is all about tracing how did transhumanism come to emerge as a believable concept. And I didn't realize the Christian origins of that. So trying to actually dive in, it took me two and a half years to actually finish this. So a full year, over a year, just reading as many books as I could find on the topic. And turns out, and we'll get into it because it's kind of its own separate conversation, it emerges out of a Christian heresy, this idea that man creating machine is actually going to endow him with the Adamic prelapsarian abilities. And by attaining those, we actually return back to the end of, we arrive at the end of history, I guess, which for them is the same point in which history began. So history is a kind of a circle, and by man's own machinations and building through technology, we will then return back to where we began, and essentially history is complete. The second coming of Christ is complete.
So what I hear that's going to be a common denominator of all those so-called Christians or religions that adopt transhumanism, there's going to be an ability for each one of them to kind of reshape themselves, shape themselves into and accepting a transhumanist eschatology. Somehow, each one, as the Mormons said, Mormons, kind of naturally go into transhumanism. Doesn't mean you have to be a Mormon to be a transhumanist. Well, so there's going to be a Catholicity, let's say, of transhumanist, kind of an incarnation of transhumanism in the various religions. They're gonna somehow adopt it and shape it and form it to comply with their own views of things.
Yes.
Is that Am I
Yes.
hearing that right? Is one of the
Yes, and
possible
that's exactly
developments?
what's happening right now. And so if you go to the Christian Transhumanist Association, you go to their blog, you can scroll down, you'll find an article that is the history of Christian transhumanism. And that's what I was going to get at. The irony is when you look at their list, it's almost all the people that I highlight in my chapter 1, which I'm highlighting as heretics. I'm highlighting that these are theological errors. I'm highlighting how they contributed to the emergent transhumanism. Well, they grab onto all those, and because they were nominally Christian, like somebody like Francis Bacon, that they then incorporate this is Christian transhumanism, and then they incorporate all these Orthodox saints. Anything, this is the big thing that and this is why I think my book, and Brandon Gallagher has an article. He's I believe somebody mentioned he's a priest. I'm not sure, but I know
he wasn't when I was researching it. I don't remember him being
okay, but he had the article in a book from 2023 or 2022, which is Religious Transhumanism and Its Critics. And there's one chapter on the Orthodox approach, and I quote him heavily.
Oh, the Russian philosopher of the turn of the century.
Well, Nikolai Fedorov.
Right.
Yeah, he was a transhumanist with the whole Russian cosmos movement. And so that's why Sergei Bolkakov, even though I do not, that name normally does not come out of my mouth to promote orthodoxy, but he was critical of the cosmos movement. And so he actually has some interesting theological critiques of transhumanism from the Orthodox perspective. Now, his sociology and some of the stuff he got into, you got to leave that alone. But there weren't that many Orthodox people that have spoke explicitly about transhumanism. And one of my frustrations that was also coming from Christian, like Protestant theologians, when I was reading these articles, unless they were outright critical, they always would appeal to Orthodox theosis as being the same thing as transhumanism to give it some type of historical spiritual validity.
That's interesting. In my conversation, is this a better mic now or worse right now?
It sounds the same to me.
Okay, the same. All right. So there's no real, and here it's the same as well or better?
Same.
Same. All right. Nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry, folks. So I was talking to this Reformed Jew, and he was like, he said, we basically see ourselves as gods or becoming gods. And I said, well, we have theosis. Yeah. So they have no distinction, of course, divine essence and energies. So yeah, that makes sense that they will grab on to theosis is very attractive for the transhumanists without understanding anything like the patristic theology.
Right, and that's what I created the research project. The way you go about it, you create a whole document with reading sources that it's kind of theoretical. This is what I think I'm going to present here, and then you go do all the research. And I framed it as a distinction between theosis and transhumanism, not realizing until I dove into all the reading that was actually quite pertinent, because so many books, I mean, I would say definitely over half, but the vast majority, if you see the term theosis mentioned, it's a correlation with transhumanism, that somehow this is what early first millennial Christians were actually aiming towards. And so the delineation between these things is, I mean, that's what my book is doing, is highlighting these are actually inversions of each other.
Yes.
And that's what chapter 4 is doing. So my book is kind of it's kind of a long climax, because the climax is at the end of the book. The first chapter, and I think is quite fascinating, the history of how these ideas actually emerge. And I end it at the very end of the 19th century, so the beginning of the 20th century. And I demonstrate how these concepts move from explicitly theological Western Christian concepts. And then eventually once you get to the Renaissance, it takes on more esoteric framework. So the Rosicrucian movement, the Illuminati of Weishaupt, the speculative Freemasonry. So
did Kabbalah,
absolutely, Kabbalah is part of it, because that whole point that man is sort of returning back to his divinity is the whole crux of it. And so the reason why I call it from Adam to Antichrist, let me just be explicit, is that what is the heresy I keep mentioning? Because I was going to dive into chapter 1. The heresy is in the 800s. So for us Orthodox, the year 800 is quite important. That's the year that Charlemagne made his pact with the Pope to found the false Holy Roman Empire, right? Obviously, the Roman Empire already existed at that time.
Indeed.
And so during the 800s to 900, this 100-year period, it's kind of forgotten, but is actually an incredibly important point in Western history. And this is called the Carolingian era. Some scholars refer to it as the Carolingian Renaissance because there was so much technological and cultural innovation during this 100-year period. Now, this is pre-schism for us. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the schism's already emerging at this point in history, but this is pre-schism. And in the mid-800s, there's a gentleman named John Scotus Erigena. He was an Irish Neoplatonist, and he was the only man in the Holy Roman Empire that was fluent in Greek and Latin and had access to people like St. Maximus the Confessor, Dionysius the Areopagite, and he had translated some of their stuff into Latin. He was one of the few people to have done that. And so he was fascinated with deification, our theosis, Neoplatonism. I mean, that was kind of his foundational presupposition, and then Western Christianity. And he came to the belief because during this period, so this is around 860, there's an invention of the heavy plow. There was new methods for forging swords, which made their swords stronger than people in the Middle East or in Asia. Blacksmithing, tanning, all these different things. They had new ways to go about this. And because of this, and he saw the growth of it, he believed that technology was going to be the way in which we returned back to Adam, and that everything that Adam lost due to the fall, so we would consider spiritual properties, he believed that mechanical technology would redeem us. Now, you wouldn't think that would actually catch on, but that was a very interesting, and right during that point, the Benedictines, so ora et labora, prayer and labor, was also a novel concept in the West, this idea that labor was actually spiritually uplifting. Before this, as I highlight in my book, for Plato and Aristotle and all of classical thinking, universal abstract thought was deemed higher than specific understanding of like how to make a chair. The understanding the process of writing and what language means for them was more true and more valuable than being able to craft a pen or some type of they viewed that as the work of slaves, that anybody could be trained to do those things, but not everybody could understand the universal meaning. And this all gets shifted with John Scotus Erigena. He reevaluates the importance of what he calls the mechanical arts, artis mechanicae. And so it's the mechanical arts that now get valorized. You have the Benedictines, which become the monastic standard in the West. You get John Scotus Erigena saying, actually, all these novelties are unique. And so as I highlight, in the Utrecht Psalter is the first representation during this period in the 800s ever that we have in Western art where God has a compass and scale in his hand. And the Psalter identifies the Christians as using this new method for sharpening their swords and the enemies of God using the older methods. And this set a new precedence even among monastics that God was bestowing the West with technological advance to fight the enemies of the church. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, oh yeah, your mic's definitely on now. I can hear it.
Oh, immediately, huh? I didn't say anything. So we got a different browser. I think we're good. All right.
Camera and your mic definitely just came back on.
All right, fantastic, good.
So what I was just to finish this thought, it's with John Scotus Erigena newly valorizes the mechanical arts. Then we get people like Hugh of St. Victor in the following century doing the exact same thing, building upon John Scotus Erigena. Then we get Giacomo Fiore, which wasn't, his stuff was never associated explicitly with technology, but he, as you know, was a dispensationalist heretic who claimed to have some prophecy about the era of the Father.
Well,
go ahead.
Can I ask a question because I'm fascinated with this? Because I read some of the scholars that you're talking about, but Fiore seemed to be another world.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I mean, isn't there, because you just mentioned, who'd you just mention?
Roger Bacon, Hugh of St. Victor.
Yeah. So Hugh of St. Victor actually in my studies, which is not related to transhumanism, was pretty orthodox in most stuff. So I'm surprised that he is a stepping stone in this dissolution
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also surprised at the image that you're talking about that actually kind of passes an Orthodox icon, right? Where the Lord has got the what does he have in his hand that you mentioned?
Compass and scale.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the famous icon? It's kind of an iconographic description, is it not? Or is it really Western? The one
It's
I've
more
seen,
Western. It's more Western. Yeah,
it is more Western. Okay, but I'm just curious. I'm curious. Where's the breaking point? Where do we jump off the ledge into? Is it with Fiore that really we kind of are propelled into another cosmology, or is it?
I would say that there's one more link, and this is the Age of Discovery. And so it's Giacomo Fiore that lays out these prophecies that there's the age of the Father, which is from Adam to Christ, essentially. Right. Then you have Christ to what he believed is his time because he believed he was a prophet. And this is the 1100s. That was the age of Christ. That was the age of the church. The third age is the age of the Holy Spirit, and that's the age of holy men. And so he actually believed that the sacraments were no longer needed. Clergy wasn't necessarily necessary. Basically it's a proto-Protestantism.
Wow. I didn't know that he said the sacraments no longer needed. That's wild.
He diminished the importance of the sacraments because in the age of spiritual men, the Holy Spirit dwells perfectly within each spiritual man, right? So you don't need the sacraments to engage with the Spirit. The Spirit's within you due to your correct understanding.
Now, he's just before Francis of Assisi, kind of a predecessor of Francis of Assisi in some ways.
In some ways, yeah. I would say the person who really becomes the voice for Joachim, because he, and I have in here Ernst Benz, multiple scholars highlighting that Giacomo Fiore's theory of the age of spiritual men is the most important prophecy or philosophical system until Marxism. They consider Marx as a type of like utopian prophecy, and they said that Giacomo Fiore not only influenced, we're going to talk about Roger Bacon, who was an alchemist, all this different stuff, but influenced all the reformers. All the reformers believed that what they were doing when they broke away from the Catholic Church is they were inaugurating the age of spiritual men, the third age. Wow. And that's why Protestantism from the get-go was already so eschatologically focused, because they truly believed that their breaking away was bringing about the millennial kingdom. Anyway, just to sum up real quick. So from Giacomo Fiore, you get Roger Bacon, he was a devout reader of Giacomo Fiore and believed that the Antichrist was just around the corner. Well, I highlight, and I mentioned this in Florida, Christopher Columbus. He believed that he was the prophet of Jacomite prophecy, and that's why his job was to extend the knowable world so that it would end history. He believed that his expansion into what we would consider South America, North America, he believed what he was doing was going to return back to the Mount Zion and establish the end of history itself. So where does the break, all this medieval mixture with this concept break? I would say it's fully broken with Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, he takes all these ideas and they become a little bit more rational. It's less spiritually focused. It's less prophetically focused. It's more, hey, look at, the Baconian revolution, for those who don't know, is that knowledge during Francis Bacon, he's considered the father of empiricism, but why he is so important and influential is he revolutionized how we come to know things. Before Francis Bacon, it was the scholastic tradition, which was basically Aristotelian logic and syllogisms is how we know something is true. With Francis Bacon, utility becomes the way in which we know something to be true, because you make something and it does the thing that you want it to do. That's the ultimate demonstration that you know something, not the ability to say it could do it through a syllogism or a theoretical structure. It's to actually do it. So you can see from Plato and Aristotle's understanding of who has higher knowledge to Francis Bacon, that table is totally flipped. And now with Francis Bacon, you get this utilitarian push for knowledge. And he has a book called New Atlantis. And in New Atlantis, and he believed that the millennial kingdom would be found in the West. New Atlantis actually takes place in North America. Now, this is before 1776, so it's not America, but it is the territory that Spain had already, at that point, they would have already had St. Augustine as a military fort would already been built. The British would have already known, Roanoke, in some of these Jamestown, some of these early colonies.
Mm-hmm.
He argued that land over there is where the millennial kingdom is going to be built. And so in his book, New Atlantis, which is a utopian novel, he actually died before completing it. And in that, it talks about these shipwrecked mariners find themselves in North America, and they get helped by this community of people who have this sort of Christian brotherly love, but they all practice a science. They all make something. They all are sort of technologically sophisticated. And what these shipwrecked mariners from Europe realize is that they live in utopia. There's a universal basic income. You don't have to work. They have all these these machines that are built, and everybody studies a science. And so this was his New Atlantis. Now, once we move from Francis Bacon, that is really the end of the Western esoteric tradition. So King James of England, who was James of Scotland, when he becomes King James of England, he despised the occult. He is the founder of the King James Bible. And he was fascinated with the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel because he was focused on the end times. He was very much eschatologically focused. And John Dee, let's say 50 years before James takes the throne, he was the court astrologer. He was the sine qua non of Elizabethan British royalty. He's the basis of the 007 agent, and he did all these occult rituals. That's a whole nother conversation. If you don't know John Dee, go into that stuff.
Right.
I don't want to dive into that. But John Dee, for King James, he elevated what he considered demonic arts. And so because James hated them so much, John Dee actually died in disgrace and poverty and much of his stuff taken from him. And so King James was not interested in any of that legacy. And Francis Bacon, being very close to King James, knew this. And so there's a Frances Yates, who has, she was a famous scholar that focused on this period, the Rosicrucians and Giordano Bruno and all that stuff. She argues that Francis Bacon, not Frances Yates, Francis Bacon was part and parcel of the Rosicrucian movement. Now, any public presentation of that he discredited, and this is why he found favor in the court of King James. Now, King James, because he hated this, all this esoteric John Dee, Paracelsian, alchemical understanding of nature and technology basically gets sanitized. And by 1660, we have the founding of the Royal Society. So for 20 years before that, you have the English Civil War, and where King James takes the throne at the beginning of the 1600s. By 1660, now we have King Charles II, and science emerges as we understand it today. And science emerges out of this occult understanding about moving towards the millennial kingdom and restoring man back to his pure divinity. That was what the Rosicrucian movement was about. That was the whole premise of it. That was the whole premise of the Illuminati movement as well. And so, because
what are we in terms of the timeline? Where are we in terms of the Illuminati on the continent? We're about 100 years after the Illuminati supposedly is founded.
Yeah. Basically, about 100 years later. So I always tell people that the 16th century is the most magical century in European history, which most people don't realize. But it's because the Corpus Hermeticum was translated in 1470 by Marsilio Ficino, and Cosimo de' Medici wanted to read that before he read Plato. Plato hadn't even been fully translated into Latin. And before he died, he said, I need to read Hermes, because they believed that the older something was, the truer it was. And they believed that Hermes Trismegistus was older than Moses. And therefore, all revelation moving forward, they believe, becomes diminished in some way. So the older it is, the better it is. It's sort of classicist understanding. Well, that leads to then the 16th century. Not only is the Protestant Reformation 1517, but all of the Paracelsian alchemy, all of Christian Kabbalah, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, that stuff's at the end of the 1400s. And so when we think of the European wizard alchemist, we're thinking of the archetype of the 1600s or the 1500s, the 16th century. And so after all the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, the Illuminati, Paracelsian alchemy, all this different stuff, Henry Cornelius Agrippa, the three books of occultism, all this stuff is written in the 1500s. By the 1600s, especially in England, they're like, no, this stuff is not going to go publicly anymore. And that is why they created the Royal Society. And essentially all this esoteric stuff splits and it goes into the speculative Freemason lodges. And then popular science is sanitized from any sort of spiritual milieu. And
you pointed out that it's debatable whether Bacon was a part of the Rosicrucians, but you think he was.
I think he was certainly knowledgeable about it because all the people he worked with, they were part and parcel of it. And
so what about this theory that the Baconians or a group of them were also basically behind Shakespeare? Is that fanciful, or is there some legitimacy?
I don't know. That's another theory. I don't really have a hard.
How extensive of an impact is Bacon? Basically, what I'm trying to get is he just the man behind the scenes, behind the curtain, pulling all the strings, or is that all just revisionist history? You think?
I mean, I personally think William Shakespeare probably existed.
Okay,
but
because it's interesting how impactful Shakespeare was, right? I mean, very impactful. And he didn't have a lot of Christian overtones.
Right.
so I'm just, maybe it's the same spirit and that's why it all seems to kind of converge. But I've always been curious about that. And the other thing is, as you're talking, what I hear again and again is utopian. That's exactly what Father Seraphim Rose says was the defining thing of it's all millennialism. It's Chiliasm. Chiliasm is the defining heretical outlook. And we'll just, it'll end in the Antichrist and in transhumanism. But you see it in all the stuff you're talking about. And of course, in the Protestant Reformation, you have tons of attempts at a utopian, attempt at making the perfect society on earth, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not something outside of the Christian Protestant milieu at all, right?
No, it's not. And that's where, because the diminution of Christianity in the West, because once 1660 arises, and that's why we have the scientific revolution. Now we have actual scientific societies, and you're not allowed to talk about theology because of the English Civil War. The first rule, it's like Fight Club. First rule is you don't speak about Fight Club. The first rule of the Royal Society is we do not debate theology or even mention it.
Wow.
You can only do science.
Because it's fascinating. It's fascinating how the various currents all serve the evisceration of the Christian worldview in the West, right? The way I described it, I don't know if it's accurate, and it goes along with dovetails on what you're saying, is that what essentially happens from the Pope on, really, the schism on, but especially since the Reformation, is you have a pendulum swing from one extreme to another, and that becomes the wrecking ball of all holy tradition, and that becomes essentially what then destroys the Christian cosmotheoria to allow for the birth of the anti-Christian scientific cosmotheoria. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now at that point, the England, Europe was still Christian, but like to the real point you're making, it's the intellectual currents of the time, right? Yes, the average person in England still viewed themselves as a very devout Christian, pious Christian. The intelligentsia was moving away from it because they're always looking at what's the next project, what's the evolution, where are we going with this? And so once you get the scientific revolution, now you have this idea of these utopian societies where science is going to solve all things. Once you move into the Enlightenment, once we get into the 1700s and really about the time of the founding of America, it moves into engineering. So you find all these engineering schools, and I highlight this in this trajectory, and it's the engineer that replaces the alchemist, just like the alchemist replaced, the prophet or the priest in the medieval period. And so now it's not just science, it's not just measuring and averaging, it's not just studying biology, it's the engineer who builds machines. And so Augustus Comte, in his positive theology, this is what the whole basis of it was, is that there was this fervor, especially in France, but in England and Germany. France was the world's leader in engineering at the time. They had all these engineering schools, and many of them were all Masons, speculative Masons. But they were explicit, and I quote them in chapter 1, how they believe that the engineer was going to bring man back to Adam, right? So the whole running theme through my whole chapter 1 is I'm trying to find quotes of these individuals that enumerate this idea that we're going to return back to Adam, right? Which obviously is not orthodox, and I highlight that in our speech because we want to return to Christ.
Right.
We don't look to Adam as like this ideal entity of who we want to return to, but that is the basis of this whole concept. Which
no talk of the new Adam. The new Adam is no longer.
No talk of the new Adam. It's about we got to get back to the old Adam, which makes sense as we'll get into explicitly with transhumanism, because they're remaking themselves into the machine. They're destroying the imago Dei for the machine, which if you want to get to the old, if the old Adam is the ideal, you're moving in the opposite direction. You know, the ontological trajectory of man is moving in reverse. It's not moving forward towards the eternal God.
Right.
And so just to summarize and end that conversation on the history part, I highlight how engineering then becomes to fulfill this role. Like it's the engineer, especially in the later half of the 18th century, that they believe is going to solve all things. And much of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, I highlight, was absolutely part of this general ethos that by understanding nature and the engineer and building things, we're going to move into a utopia. And so I move at the very last shift in chapter 1 to America, and I highlight how America was seen as the shining city on the hill, whether it be Plymouth Rock from the Puritans, but everybody moving forward. And I highlighted all these different descriptions.
So this is really France and England mainly in terms of who we're talking about intellectually.
Yes, mostly
no involvement of the Mediterranean. A lot of people.
No. Yeah. No, I didn't find anything regarding Orthodox saints, Orthodox clergy,
or even Catholicism. Not a lot of Catholic, Roman Catholic.
There was Catholics speaking out against this stuff, but at the same time, the problem with the Catholic Church is the Protestant North was so damn productive. What are they going to do? How can they argue against it? Right. And so and that's where you get the Industrial Revolution and basically separate. And still today, the GDP of Northern Europe versus Southern Europe, you can see it right there, because we can get into the Protestant work ethic, Max Weber witnessing this change and seeing how the Protestants work so hard because they don't have sacraments and confession. They are working out their salvation through their labor. So
it's interesting you talk about the rise of the engineers in the 1700s, basically, right? So setting the stage for the 1800s, which is the birth of the Industrial Revolution, essentially, right?
Yeah, and socialism, right? So so then you get socialism in the 1800s, and I highlight at the very end of chapter 1 there that focusing on America, because America then takes on the promise that it's going to fulfill this utopian millennial kingdom. And I have all these engineers, the leading engineers of America, all stating the same thing about Adam, that they're going to return back to Adam. And there's a famous book by Edward Bellamy called Looking Backwards. And it was the most popular book at the time, only to Uncle Tom's Cabin. And what it is.
What years in America?
Like 1870.
The other thing that struck me before you go on, and don't forget that part of the timeline, is that when the rise of the engineers didn't happen except in Western Europe, essentially. I mean, you don't have that in the Orthodox world, really. No. So I'm thinking to myself, what gave birth to that? Is it not scholasticism in the sense that they're now the whole method first, right? The method is not that much different. We're going to sit down and analyze speculatively and structurally, and we're going to look at things in a rationalistic way, and we're going to talk about the world and God's creation and God himself from that perspective, from the scholastic rationalistic approach to God, and not the experiential theology. So they're saying, well, okay, you're doing that with regard to the heavenly things. We're going to do that with regard to the earthly things. The methodologies and the idea of how we achieve progress is not all that different, right? We're just focusing on creation as opposed to the creator. Is that accurate, or would that be just kind of? I'm trying to figure out where does this love and rise of engineers come in a society? I mean, they're no longer looking to heaven; they're looking entirely to the earth. So,
yeah. So the presuppositional shift had to do with Bacon's utilitarian pursuit of knowledge. I mean, it's hard to understate how revolutionary that was in Europe at the time. I mean, we don't get Kant and his critique of pure reason and metaphysics without Bacon shifting the way in which, especially England, especially the Anglosphere, understood what knowledge is, which turns into utility. And so because of that, and then because England was then taking off compared to the rest of Europe, France also then, with this engineering, they see that they take the abstract, the universal, and they then instantiate it into physical things that make life better and more productive.
So they just didn't have any saints to tell them the vanity of it all? That was what they were missing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, Auguste Comte, he would say that he is the saint. Like it moves into this ideal. I mean, by the late 1700s and early 1800s, you have engineers in France talking about a purely mechanical man. It's that early. It's, 200 years before transhumanism is actually, they didn't have the digital technology. So they're talking very much a robotic, like machine man, but there was already a concept that a machine man could always be upgraded and he would never die. And that this is something that they needed to pursue, which I connect back with all the Golem myths and Jew, the famous rabbi in Prague and Golem, and that was a thing in Judaism, that if you were a very erudite rabbi, you could essentially co-create life. And that concept was embedded in all that esoteric lore. I mean, do
you see any signs of these atheist, agnostic, engineer having connection to Kabbalah or or I don't know what? I mean, the theory, just a non-Christian cosmos theory, and not just a rejection of Christianity, but an adoption of that self-deification mentality.
Absolutely, yeah. I let me bridge into and right into that.
Yeah, so we're going into origins of transhumanism, basically. Is that where we're at in terms of the?
I'm getting ready to bridge it right into actual transhumanism.
Okay.
And so in America, Edward Bellamy's book, Looking Backward, in the 1870s, 1880s, was talking about basically Costco's, massive supermarkets where you could buy in bulk. You paid with a credit card. You watched entertainment on a screen at home, TV.
What? This is what? In the 1870s, you're talking
about? Yes. It's called Edward Bellamy's. It's called Looking Backward, and he was a socialist utopian, and this created political movements. Like if you look into the impact of the book Looking Backward in America, it was incredibly impactful. These new socialist movements popped up because they saw that if we could, so of course it's UBI stuff, universal basic income. You don't have to work. Machines are doing most of the labor. You get to live a life of leisure. And this is what it means to live in the millennial kingdom, essentially. And so he writes this book. And about a decade later, after this is, again, one of the best sellers, it's only to Uncle Tom's Cabin is it below in regard to the amount of copies sold. He laments the fact that in America, he said the problem that he lost all his sort of socialist utopian dreams, because in America, what he saw was that Americans only cared about the latest innovation and they didn't care whether it benefited people or not, right? I mean, irony. This is like in 1890, he's writing this. The irony is, and today people are camping out for the latest iPhone. Again, not concerned whether it's good for them or not, but because there's a new innovation. And he was characterizing that this was uniquely part of the American mind in the 1890s. And so he said, because Americans only care about innovation, they don't care about how the innovations can be used to amplify us as individuals and human beings, that this is going to be doomed, that technology is actually going to entrap us. That's what he was worried about. And so that's the end of the 19th century. In the 20th century, where we get the first time in history, the word transhumanism comes from Julian Huxley in a 1957 book called New Bottles for New Wine. And in the end of the 1920s, he had written a book called Religion Without Revelation, where he's talking about how what the West needs now is a religion without revelation. Essentially, the myths of Christianity, they're socially good. Religion has a utility for society, but it's just not believable anymore. And so we need to create a new religion, a religion without revelation. And now you fast forward 30 years or 20 some years later to the 1957 book. And he says, you know what this new religion is? It's called transhumanism. It's humans transcending their biological limitations. That's the point of all this stuff. That's the faith we need. And that's going to liberate us from essentially what he viewed as the problems with being a man in space and time. And so from 1957, and then once you start getting into the 1960s and 1970s, you get the cybernetics movement, which is this idea that, oh, we can actually influence human beings based on digital or technological feedback loops. Stoplights are an example of a cybernetic feedback. The light's red, you act in a certain way. You come to a stop, the light turns green, you move. And there's a feedback, just like your thermostat in your house. And they were contemplating this in New York, the greatest thinkers of the time in the 20th century, thinking, how can we create technologies to create cybernetic feedback loops to make man better? And then, now you're getting the idea that technology is merging with this sort of techno-humanism. Make
man better, or just manipulate him into a particular.
Well, the rhetoric is the making better, right? Yeah. But again, you ask what worldview are these people coming from? Well, mostly secular, rationalist, materialist. Some, maybe a perennial spiritual. They may label themselves Christian or Jewish, but it's a very perennial. Just like you said with the rabbi,
right?
So then once you get into the cybernetic movement, and then in the 1980s, you get Werner Vinge mentioning the word singularity. John von Neumann is the first person to really mention the concept of the singularity. And this is, von Neumann was working with the Manhattan Project and all these sort of black projects with the US government. Well, at the end of the 1950s, he said, well, what we're doing, he's kind of the father of the computer and all this stuff. He said, what we're doing, and this was right before he died, this is according to his best friend, we're moving to a point with the exponential growth of technology where it's essentially going to be able to fix itself. And once that happens, that is essentially going to be the end of history. Well, that was the idea. And then Werner Vinge characterized that as the singularity. Once you get into the 1990s and the early 2000s, Ray Kurzweil then takes the mantle. Max Moore really establishes and cements transhumanism as a philosophical orientation in the 1990s. So he talks about extropy. He develops this philosophy that we are critical realists. That's his epistemology. We're critical realists, meaning that truth, because he believes that truth is relative. He's against the tradition of metaphysics. He's against the idea that there's objective moral truths, but he's a critical rationalist, meaning that through science, they can come to an understanding of how the world works. And if something new emerges, then they move to that. But again, there's no metaphysical grounding for any of this stuff. It's not really sophisticated philosophy. And then their anthropology is this functionalist understanding of mind. So what is metaphysics? Well, it's functionalism, and therefore it's tying us back into the machine. The metaphysics for them, in chapter 4, I describe it as henosis, which is a Neoplatonic word for everything being subsumed back into the one. They are Neoplatonic. It's just materialism, though. There is no metaphysical henosis. It's material. I mean, their endpoint is everything is connected back to the AI. So
sounds like a little bit of Eastern mysticism in there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and you could call it Eastern mysticism or Neoplatonism. It's the same idea that there's non-duality, right? Yeah. It's moving to a non-dual state. And that's ultimately what they believe is where they're moving to. And that's how they're going to get out of the duality of life and death, right? How do we get out of the dualities of existence itself? Well, we move into the machine where we can control all these things and you can choose. So and I highlight in my book that theurgy of the Neoplatonists. I mean, Iamblichus talked about how you can, indwell statues with daemons for them. I mean, demons for us. It's really just a semantic distinction, but
kind of like Miaphysite and Monophysite.
Yeah. And the Corpus Hermeticum, the book Asclepius, is about Hermes teaching his student Asclepius of how to put daemons into statues. And so the idea that they're going to theurgically create or make God act, that is, I tie that to all these writings of these transhumanists, because they're very theurgic. I mean, they literally believe they're creating God. They're bringing God into existence. They're giving God a physical body.
So obviously it's not anything like any even any classical religion idea of God, it's really the demons that's what they're talking about. It's demonic power that they're manipulating or something. I mean, right? There's no.
For some of them, somebody like some of these guys that are into the occult would be okay with that. They probably wouldn't put the demons in a value judgment, right? So I definitely believe they're talking to demons or they're influenced by demons. They would say,
but the demons are like God, they're godlike, or what are they? What are they? Creations of another God? They don't have that.
They don't believe in a metaphysical God. They believe that and again, it depends on which transhumanist you're asking. If you ask somebody like Nick Bostrom, Max Moore, Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel kind of says he's Christian or something, but Elon Musk, for example, they'd say, well, the idea of all the religions that believe in God, that's not the God we're creating. We're actually just creating an entity that has all those characteristics. He's omnipresent. He's omnipotent.
Right.
And so they believe they're physically constructing the thing that everybody has theorized that God would be like. And
so superhuman, some of them are superhuman powers, things that have. So in a way, they're humanists who want to do away with humans.
Yes, that's actually how they identify themselves. So transhumanism hates the postmodernist. So so you wouldn't think that, because you think, oh, these transhumanists, they're kind of, from our perspective, our presupposition, they have relativism, they have subjectivism. No, they hate the postmodernists because they believe the postmodernists do not lead to any sort of growth. The transhumanists view themselves as the endpoint of modernity. They view themselves as the completion of modernity. They are explicit that they're humanists, and therefore they're not postmodernists, right? They're not decentering the man as the anthropological subject. That's really the difference, right? So humanism is focusing that man is the sole source of all inquiry. For transhumanists, they're saying that's exactly what we're doing. We are humanists. The only difference is they are part of a movement called not only post-genderism, but post-humanity. So they're humanists that are focused on elevating humanity into a post-human existence.
So it's kind of like the next stage in the evolutionary ascent.
That's exactly what they believe. And if you're going to say a God that they believe in, most would probably be okay if you said evolution was a God. Because they believe that to be the ultimate causal forces in creation.
So they're okay not answering any of the first cause, first principle questions. They just don't go there.
Yeah, they don't even try to answer those.
Which in and of itself is phenomenal to me. Like, it just always blew my mind. Like, how can you be at peace if you don't get the number one question? How do you think you can figure out the rest? I've never understood. It's such a basic logical mistake. Not even a question of faith.
And that the whole movement is that Tower of Cards. The whole premise of uploading yourself into a machine is not even possible, right? And even if they think it's possible, there's been all these critiques to their fundamental anthropology. So, for example, there's a famous thought experiment on what's called qualia. So let's just assume functionalism is true, that a mind is a mind as long as it can functionally do the same activity. Well, the problem is human experience has qualia. So the thought experiment is, imagine there's a color scientist. Let's say her name is Susie. And Susie knows everything about colors, and she knows every single scientific detail about the color red, but she's colorblind. Does she know everything about red if she's never subjectively seen the color red? And that right there then highlights that the functionalist definition does not have a place for subjective experience as a point of actual epistemological truth.
Yeah, so experience is, in a sense, it's not even a part of their anthropology. It's not a part of their anthropology, their epistemology. It doesn't matter.
Correct. And that's why that's why they hate postmodernists. You see, because postmodernists say that you have your own truth. The transhumanist says, you guys are idiots. Do you see the AI system I'm building? Like, if I was I wouldn't do any of this if I was a dumb postmodernist. No, they believe in science. They believe in evolution. They believe in basically the modernist project, And I always say the 5 pillars of modernity is rationalism, individualism, scientism, technological progress, and democracy. These are the 5 things that become novel intellectual movements once we reach the Enlightenment. And so this appeal to democracy all the time. We got to spread democracy. Well, look what that's led to. And notice how all these transhumanists keep talking about how the AI is going to be a better democratic system. The AI is going to regulate our society in a more democratic way.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So here's a question going a little bit. I don't want to get stuck here, but I wanted to ask before, and it's curious because some of the things you're saying brings to mind a book by Philip Sherrard. Did you read any Sherrard in your analysis?
I have some up here. Yeah.
Now, I don't like Sherrard on he's got some major errors on perennialism and things like that, but he goes too extreme on some stuff. But he posits in, I think it was called Human. What's the book that it's been a long time since I read it. Human Image, Human Person, something like that. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, he posits a second fall at the Enlightenment, because what you're talking about here is just a total rejection of any kind of classical, not even Christian, but just classical anthropology. That they're total materialists, and yet that's why I'm really curious about the satanic occult element to it all, because this is all, everything you're saying is positing an entire materialistic anthropology, right? I mean, man is just there's no spirit, there's no heart, there's no right. I mean, how do they?
An emergent property of the self that they believe the AI will also have the same emergent property. That's the only unique thing to you. Because for Yuval Noah Harari, he has the famous book, Homo Deus. And if you get towards basically the last fourth of that book, he's now explicitly laying out what he calls the religion of the future, which he calls Dadaism.
He calls it the religion of the future. The religion of the future, he calls it. It's fascinating.
Dadaism. And Dadaism,
I remember this,
is the idea that the only thing that has ontological validity in existence is data, and that what you and I are biological algorithms. And so by shifting the definition that we're algorithms, now there is no distinction between the digital algorithm and a biological algorithm. He argues that the difference between a tomato and a human is the ability to recognize patterns, and that we essentially are just a pattern recognizing organism.
Wow.
And that's how he redefines us anthropologically, is that it's just everything is data recognition, and therefore you can't compete with the AI, So that's why I always tell the white supremacists or the people that are so focused on IQ and racial differences. Of course, those exist, but if you're going to define everybody by IQ, you're playing the same game they're playing, and you can't beat the AI. So what are you doing? Like, the AI will recognize patterns way faster than you can.
Well, this is the trap. This is the trap: is that you're going to counter an ideology, or with another ideology, or you're going to counter a piecemeal, deconstruction or disintegration of the human person with another version of the same. This is just the continuation of the pendulum swing for the last 1,000 years. There's no Catholicity or wholeness to the vision of man and creation, right? So as long as you're not holistic and Catholic in the true sense of the word in your theology and outlook, you're part of the problem.
Yes. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And so these modern transhumanists, like Yuval Noah Harari, believes this Dadaism is going to be able to shift the way, and he says, whether you like it or not, the AI is going to be everything that you claim God is. It's going to know, because he claims that we're going to be forced with biometric data meters. And he's saying that the AI is going to know more about your physical body than you do. The AI is going to know what you think and be able to predict your next thought or movement or purchase online before you do. That is God. What are you talking about? For him, there's no functional difference between what the AI is going to do for him in 2040.
So knowledge is power. Power is God. I mean, there's nothing more to these people's understanding of the higher.
Absolutely. And so, though, I would say that is the strain of the atheist transhumanist. Now you have all these people like the Society of Cosmic Engineers. This is where this William Sims Bainbridge, the sociology, he's part of an order called the Society of Cosmic Engineers. So what did I just say about the 1700s, this valorization of the engineer? Well, one of the explicitly religious groups where they're doing rituals, they're gathering together they'll say, oh no, we're not part of religion. We're just utilizing transhumanism to create a religion for the future. Their whole thing is how they're gods that are creating God. That's what their engineering pursuit is doing. These people are very explicit and spiritual in the way that they associate with transhumanism. And so, so it's not just these atheists, but their worldview, as I said, epistemologically, it's sort of this critical rationalism. Their metaphysics, they don't really have one. The best would be a sort of functionalist redefining based on the machine. And then their ethics is just sort of utilitarianism. That's the majority. They call that, you know, Max Moore says, well, I promote virtue ethics and utilitarian. On what virtue ethics, bro? Like, you don't believe in metaphysics. Like, what are you talking about? How can you be a virtue ethicist? You don't even believe in metaphysics.
Wow.
So again, these people, they're really easy to critique, but the amazing thing is these people have PhDs from Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, and nobody seems to like do a basic precept of their worldview and demonstrate that doesn't even make logical sense.
That's good news for you, because you're going to corner the market on this stuff. When
I hope, as long as
Yeah.
people can read. I know this isn't a popular reader, right? So this isn't for, you know, an 18-year-old person. This is an academic.
Yeah.
It goes into great.
Well, you got to start there, and then you'll make a reader, or you'll write articles, and you'll try to, you know, but you got to start with the total analysis. I think that's that's where you got to start.
So regarding Orthodox, how does Orthodoxy come into all this stuff?
Let's talk about that. And then after we get that, we also want to look at some practical issues, because everybody in the chat's going like, well, what do you do? Right? That's always the question at the end of the day. Well, what do we do? But we'll get there. So let's hear chapter 3, basically. I think this is where you're going to give us, or at least chapter 4 together with an Orthodox analysis.
Yeah, 3 and 4 together real quickly is so this whole thing, most of this conversation was laying out how transhumanism emerged and how we got here. And much more detail in the book. If you feel like I've missed stuff or you're not following, it's all laid out in great detail in the book.
Absolutely.
Where does theosis come into here? Well, the argument, the intellectual game that I'm playing is I'm actually utilizing Jürgen Habermas, part of the Frankfurt School, not a huge supporter of the Frankfurt School, but he does have a really good theory, along with Charles Taylor of Canada, called post-secularism. And what they argued, this was really beginning in the 90s, but especially in the 21st century, is they argue there is no such thing as secular ideologies anymore. That all secular ideologies function as total meaning-making processes to individuals who believe them, who claim that they don't believe in a God. So that secular worldviews now function as religions. And this is a way to get away from, because before this theory, if you're going to say, you know, psychedelics is a new religious movement, that you would then you'd be forced to say, okay, well, where's their core doctrine? What books do they read? Which rituals do they engage? You know, basically the definition of what we would consider as religion. Yeah. So then you come to a hard spot and be like, well, I can't, you know, they don't fit this spot here, and they don't fit this, but they fit these. And then somebody would say, well, then it's not fully a religion.
So we just have to redefine it so we don't have to worry about those things. Right.
But with a post-secular theory, I don't need to worry about putting the transhumanism into all these categories or whatever. It could be communism. Communism, people, you know, communists may not think they're religiously oriented, but from a post-secular worldview, that is your meaning making. Everything, every decision, all your political ideas are motivated by this.
Right.
And so using a post-secular frame, I argue that transhumanism and theosis are the competing narratives about deification in the Western world. Difference, and the fundamental difference, and what I'm trying to lay out in chapter 3, it's not just the worldview of orthodoxy and the totality of theosis and what it means, but that this is a pre-modern approach. And that the difference between these two things is that transhumanism is a modern attempt at deification. Theosis is a pre-modern understanding of a relationship with God, a synergistic deification. And so this thing, I've mentioned this multiple times before, is I think that this is happening at a subconscious level in our society. When you look at all these young men, whether it be orthodoxy, trad Catholicism, or paganism, what's the commonality between all these things is that young men are fleeing modernity. Now, it's totally unconscious. It's not like they're thinking in the way I'm articulating it, but they're moving to pre-modern worldviews that allow for mysticism, worldviews that allow, you know, superstition or things that are super rational. Community over individuals, tradition over like consumer identity. People are yearning for these things. And I argue it's because there's a tension between the pre-modern and the post, or the modern and the postmodern. So I quote Christos Yanaras, that he has a whole discussion on postmodernity as a welcoming critique of modernity by us Orthodox Christians. Now, we don't agree with the postmodernists on the parts, but the fact that the postmodernists are correctly highlighting that modernity has failed on all of its goals. The 20th century was supposed to be a modern utopia, and it killed more people than any point in human history.
Right.
So it's a kind of a joke, the idea that modernity is successful at any point. And so the fact that the postmodernists are critiquing it, in a sense, they're on our side. The difference is, and why Christos Yanaras believed that orthodoxy had a future in the West, is because when modernity begins to collapse, not only do we have the subjective element that the postmodernists have, because that's how we relate to God. Our epistemology begins with the subjectivism to experience mysticism, to experience the uncreated energies. Rationalism and science, all these things are further down our epistemological ladder, but we include all of them. And we have traditional metaphysics. And so Christos Yanaras said, we actually should embrace the postmodern critique, because we will outcompete the postmodernists, because we have a totalizing worldview. But we need allies in the taking down of modernity, because it's so strong. So in chapter 3, I highlight how orthodoxy, the logos theology, its understanding of Christ, it's a therapeutic ethic, right? So we're virtue ethics. We have a virtue ethics or virtue ethicists, but we don't just do virtue like for Aristotle, just to be the most fulfilled and full human being. It's a therapeutic. There's actually a mystery happening, that when you're virtuous, you're actually being spiritually healed. And so I highlight how this is a totally different understanding of deification. And then in chapter 4, I use Bulgakov's God manhood versus man godhood. And I think I quote you in there when you're in your article from transhumanism. And then I get into their metaphysics and show how theosis and henosis are total inversion. Theosis allows for particulars, me, an individual, and the universal, God, right? So it does not annihilate one over the other, where henosis annihilates individual subjectivism to blend into the henosis of the machine. And
that sounds like Buddhism, and you're blending into the essence of God or something. It's just the person is lost.
Yes, and transhumanism is very explicit that that's the point, because the idea of who you are is an illusion, but all your memories and your life experiences can be uploaded by what they call a connectome. It's the ultimate mapping of the neurons in the brain.
Well, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal how they've just emptied the human person into the rational intellect, and not even that, like just data. It's phenomenal.
Data. No, and Ray Kurzweil's happy about it. I highlight an article, I think it was in Rolling Stone magazine, where Ray Kurzweil talks about how excited he is with the technology and where it's going. And by 2040, he fully expects that he's not only going to be able to upload all his memories and stuff into the computer and be a simulation of himself, but he'll be able to go to his father's gravesite and collect a little bit of DNA, and then he'll be able to reconstruct his father as well.
It's unbelievably stupid.
And they're serious about this. So,
wow.
So in chapter 4, I talk about the difference between the mind and the soul. So the whole point of transhumanism is localizing man to mind, but again, your mind isn't actually real. It's just an emergent property from brain matter. And so the whole focus is they limit our anthropology to the brain or the mind, where ours is the soul. And so I highlight the noetic differences of our understanding of that.
You must talk about image and likeness and creation of man, and
absolutely. And then I get into the post-secular moment and talking about the search of meaning. I already highlighted the post-secular theory in chapter 2. And then in chapter 4, I talk about what does it mean to be in the post-secular moment? Well, that is the meaning crisis that Jordan Peterson and Pageau and John Vervaeke, that they talk about often. That is a real thing. And that's why so many people are finding meaning in the pre-modern worldviews. But the search for meaning is legitimate. And that's where I'm arguing in the very last section of the very last chapter. And it's titled Return to Babylon, from Adam to Antichrist. So that's what I mean. It's a very long climax to get to the end of the book. But the last section then is demonstrating that in the meaning crisis, These are the two narratives of deification that are ultimately competing with each other. And people, I mean, you can see it online. So many people are nihilistic, but they're finding meaning in transhumanist future. They're finding meaning in the promises of immortality and supernatural abilities through machines. And
this reminds one of Father Seraphim Rose's nihilism, where he says the whole point is not to end in nothing, but to end in the Antichrist. So there's a day after of nihilism, right? Which is
right. And so I do not believe that transhumanism will ever actually take place, right? But my point in the book in the last section is demonstrating that even to move further with the trajectory of what the transhumanists desire, it is setting the stage from an Orthodox eschatological perspective. So I put transhuman into perspective from an Orthodox eschatological view, which I hadn't done in that book yet. And so now from an Orthodox perspective, you're seeing how it maps on. So I highlight, like Umberto Eco has a book on basically the meaning of perfect language. And he highlights, now he wasn't a Christian or anything, but he's highlighting that digital technologies, ones and zeros, and JavaScript or C++, these are now the new language, you know, the new Tower of Babel, the new attempt to create a universal language. But this language, like the loving of the engineer, actually does something, right? It's not just communication. It's not just a universal tongue. This is a communication that has inputs. It actually makes the machine work. And so from an Orthodox perspective, I highlight how we don't believe technology is evil because it doesn't have a will. But that doesn't mean technology can't be used for evil. And I have all these, I think you're mentioned again in the last section, every Orthodox clergy I could find or philosopher that spoke on this. And I highlight the criticisms and how this is moving towards a totally controlling monetary, biometric system, world government system. And this is setting the stage for Antichrist. So even to get to the last stage before the singularity, for us, is the end of history itself. It literally is the anti-kingdom. It's the Antichrist kingdom. And so and obviously I don't think we're going to move past that. So it's not like transhumanism is going to come to play.
But the promise of it itself will set the stage for the Antichrist to be embraced, because he will promise it and they will hope in him.
Yes. And that's what I end with, is demonstrating that these worldviews aren't just opposites. These worldviews aren't just competing with each other, which they are. Yeah. But these worldviews, if you look at it from orthodoxy, is literally creating the kingdom of Antichrist.
You just reminded me. You just reminded. Yeah, it is the kingdom of Antichrist. Absolutely. You reminded me now. The first book I ever read in orthodoxy, which was Orthodox Religions of the Future, and the thing that I put the book down and I said, "Wow, you know, it's actually Satan, whether he likes it or not. He's pointing back to Christ."
Yes.
What you just told me was all of your activities, your endless activities, no matter what you think you're doing, utopia and all the rest, it all points back and validates the Christian gospel.
Yes.
Phenomenal, actually.
And in my book, which I didn't focus on our conversation, but I detail how it's so subtly an inversion. So the idea that God enters space and time, they believe that. They just recharacterize it as the AI. The idea of an immaculate conception. Well, yeah, the AI doesn't have to be given birth. The idea that you're going to be able to transcend your temporary limitations. Well, yeah, that's exactly what they put forth. The idea that these softwares and things are sacramental. I mean, you can go through our worldview. How
about they're going to live forever. They're not going to die. They're going to overcome death.
Resurrection. All this stuff. So it's literally the Christian worldview just so subtly flipped and totally inversed.
So this is what Augustine said about the devil, right? He's the ape of God. So the devil just looks and says, okay, I'm going to create a better version of whatever you think you've accomplished.
Yes.
He's just imitating God.
I've said, and this is totally theoretical and speculative on my part. But that's why I refer to transhuman as the cybernetic skeleton of Satan, right? So God gives us free will, but where we're moving, you do not have the choice, right? That is not interested in giving you a free choice. I mean, and Yuval Noah Harari is explicit in his book, at the end of his book, and I have the quote in my book. He says you're going to like it whether you want to or not. And you're going to be considered a heretic if you don't actually blend with the machine. If you don't take, the biometric data so we can see your body or we can see your thoughts, then you're a heretic. And just like the religions of old, we're going to have to probably execute you because you're a threat to us.
Wow. Like he's just totally telling us that they will be the Antichrist. They will be this system of Antichrist.
Right. And he himself is a homosexual Jew. He teaches at Tel Aviv University.
He's got a lot of things going against him, poor guy.
Yeah.
God have mercy. Lord have mercy. Well, you brought back my thinking about civilization, Cain and Abel, Babylon. We're returning to Babylon. What was Babylon? Babylon was the fruit of the search for civilization in a way, right? I mean, the desire for a civilization. In other words, this world kingdom on earth, utopia, it's always been about God without God, the paradise without paradise. And so you got to wonder, is all of these technological innovations inspired by Satan?
I mean, ultimately, I would argue through the logismy, it is. Ultimately, they're demonic temptations. Now, you ask some of these people, and they would say, give you the rigmarole about how they're a good person and they pay their taxes. And
well, obviously, that's not a moral. We're not talking about moral questions here. We're not talking about whether they were kind to their neighbor. We're talking about the inspiration,
exactly,
inspiration of what and where their orientation is. Because to be able to spend your entire life trying to discover how electricity and whatever it is that you're discovering, you have forgotten about paradise, heaven, the other world. And so for all this to happen, you have to have, for the most part, you have to be oriented toward this world.
Yes.
Right. And so the question is not so much is that, can these things be used for good? I think they can be, in spite of, just like all things, God takes the bad and transforms into the good. And we're going to try to redeem them. We're going to baptize them, whatever it is. And that's fine. But the origins, the purpose, the goal, who inspired it? Why would God inspire any of these things when he gave us paradise and it didn't have any of this? And he gave us Christ and the church, and it's not based on any of this. It's based on relations of persons and love and communion. So do we need electricity for that? Do we need a phone for that? No, we don't actually, any of that. None of that's necessary for us to be in God and to live eternity already in this world. Now, that doesn't mean we become Luddites. I don't think most Orthodox would agree with Ludditism. Right. But let's not be foolish to think that God is just pining for the next technological innovation. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, because I think that's almost a given in today's society. Like, of course, it's an automatic good. That's why I always was amazed at the Amish, not because their theology or their life is necessarily Christian life. They got a lot of problems in their theology and their legalism and all that. One thing I liked about, I was amazed because when I studied the Amish response to electricity in 1911 or whatever it was, they didn't ask the same questions most people asked. They asked really Christian questions like, how is this going to affect our community? How is this going to affect our relationships? How is this going to impact our communion and our face-to-face and our identity and the boundaries of our community and these things? They said, well, actually, it's going to probably dissolve them. It's going to be an acceleration of a dissolution of our community. We don't need them. That was a very, very rare response to the next technological innovation. So today you see people line up, and they were talking about it in the 1870s, they line up for the next iPhone as an automatic good in their life. Like there's no question that's good.
And that's part of the American ethos, right? That is one of the things that I try to enumerate, is that America was defined by like constantly trying to find the boundaries. Well, once we hit California, the west coast of California, it makes sense that this American entrepreneurial pursuit towards the millennial kingdom spirit takes place in Silicon Valley, because instead, we've reached the expanse of the geological territory. Now we have to continue the frontier. Where's the frontier? Now it's technology, right? And so, like you highlighted, transhumanism is at war with the world that God created. Every aspect of that's why they want you to eat your, lab grown meat. The whole idea is they want to, whether they're conscious of it or not, but just looking at everything that they recommend and prescribe, it's to do away with the world that God created. And just as you talked about with the Amish, there is no value to personal relationships. They would say the only value is you find it meaningful. But if with the AI robot that has, the anatomy and the physical appearance of a human, you'll find that meaningful. So they don't really care about community.
I was just about to say it's egotism on steroids times 1,000.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
It's like God's creation. Man, we can do better. Meat? No, and so everything is just, we're going to do better. It's unbelievable egotism. And of course, what that means is they're not in reality. They don't live in reality, because the egotist is totally blind to reality himself, who he is, his origins, his identity. It's the humble person who lives in deep reality. He has self-knowledge. He knows who God is. He knows who himself is, and he's grounded in reality. The proud man is the one who lives in a delusion, in a make-believe world. And these people are creating essentially a make-believe world. Like it's fake. It's not even, does not reflect who we are as human beings. It doesn't reflect who God is. It doesn't reflect the purpose of our life. It's phenomenal. That's the fruit of this unbelievable egotism.
And to your point about the fantasy, this is why in my book I highlight Max Moore's wife, Natasha Vita Moore. She's also a famous transhumanist artist, but she promotes and others, Anders Hamburg, all these different transhumanists, this idea of called morphological freedom, right? That we need to be able, that we have there's a taint on this idea that we can fully morph our body, right? That what I call the scarification of human form, with the nose piercings, the tattoos, and all this stuff. It's sort of pagan scarification. Well, they talk about how morphological freedom is essential for transhumanism to essentially be accepted by society. And what is the first thing that all transhumanists then promote is transgenderism. So you're talking about living in a fantasy. They embrace transgenderism because it means that if we will normalize the idea that a man can become a woman, well, then we'll normalize the idea that a man can become a machine.
Yeah.
And so they're totally in lockstep with that. And then I highlight a transhumanist who's part of a subfield called postgenderism. And he's talking about explicitly with James Hughes, who's another famous transhumanist academic. I think he also does he's a religious studies sociology guy, so in the same field that I'm in. But he, with this other, I forget the other dude's name who the article is with, but it's about postgenderism. And what they're arguing is that procreative sex will not be done between two individuals. In the future, in their dream scenario, you will be able to have as much sex as you want with whoever you want, because you can't procreate. The only way you procreate is you go to the lab, and then they will grow your baby in a synthetic womb. And that way, all genetic mutations or limitations can be absolved in the lab. And we can then have perfect babies, and we can then calculate how many babies we want just when. So they literally, the way they say it is that sex will just be for pleasure and recreation, and reproduction will be done in laboratories.
Wow. Well, it's phenomenal. Like there's almost no area, no matter how sacred, no matter how important to the human person, that they won't destroy and eviscerate and make into, it's phenomenal. I don't know. Should we say a few words before we open up the question about your thoughts now? How do we avoid Babylon for ourselves, our family, our communities? How do we go not from Adam to Antichrist, but to the new Adam?
Number one, obviously, the end of the book is essentially promoting orthodoxy. And so I would say you need, first and foremost, you need to become Orthodox and form a relationship with Christ and be illuminated through the sacraments. Discernment is the big thing here, right? Because every time I bring up this topic, I get the people, just like you mentioned, they go to the extreme Luddite. Oh, well, I got to flee for the mountains. I got to, throw my smartphone, my computer away. Well, according to Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu and St. Paisios, the golden age of orthodoxy will be spread through this medium, the same medium that is also going to use to entrap us. So again, the irony of God's providence takes evil and turns it into a good. We don't need to be Luddites, but we do need discernment. And the question that people ask me, and it was asked at the conference, is like, where is the line we don't cross? And I can have my own personal belief, but I don't know of anybody in the church who's really speaking to the faithful about where the line is. Let's say it's a digital currency. Well, let's say you're a faithful Orthodox man that has a family and you own a plumbing business. And the only way to run your plumbing business is that you now have to accept the digital currency. Is that man condemned by the mark of the beast? Because he probably not, right?
Yeah.
So where exactly? Now, I would say an easy one is the infiltration of your body. But then people will say, well, my dad has a pacemaker. Okay, well, the pacemaker is good. But, we need discernment here. If you're talking about Neuralink and then you're equating it to glasses, which many transhumanists do, they'll say, well, what's the difference between putting electrodes in your brain? You've been, you're homo techne, right? They define humanity based on the use of technology. And you've been using technology. Look at your bifocals, right? That's a form. It's like, well, that's kind of a far off connection, using bifocals to putting electrodes in my brain. But they try to make the equivalent. So if you're already wearing glasses, well, how can you argue that, brain?
Well, it's a continuum to go from digital currency, digital ID to totalitarian system with the mark of the beast, right? There's steps.
Yes.
So we can recognize that and we can understand where we are in the whole process, and we can say this is a part of that process, but it's not the same thing as this boundary that's crossed. And that's one of the reasons why the Lord gave us that boundary very clearly in Holy Scripture and in the Holy Fathers to know. But that won't be just another technological step. It'll be associated with the worship of this man of iniquity. It'll be a spiritual compromise along with a technological so-called advance. But having said that, we need to be very cognizant of the steps and the types of the mark of the beast, right? So yes, the jab was a kind of image of what was to come. It's a type. In some ways, you can see how it's not the thing, obviously, right, but it's a part of the process. And so we have to be very cognizant of that, and not. Here's the spiritual problem: not become accustomed, not become attached. Right? Okay, yeah, use it, but don't become a slave to it. The Lord, Apostle Paul says, everything is permitted, but not everything is profitable. Right.
Right.
So what's profitable? That's where we need to have the discernment.
And streams that I've done on some of the prophecies, end time prophecies from church saints and elders, is just like COVID, the way that the evil one is going to get people to accept this is through fear. And so why did so many people get the jab? They knew that it wasn't well researched. They just assumed, based on fidelity to the establishment and the government, that it was going to be safe, which we now know it's not. And because of fear, they made a decision that compromises them for the rest of their life.
Yes.
And the same thing is going to be true when the saints and elders talk about the actual Antichrist and the actual seal of Satan. That is the reason people are going to get that, is because famine, global war, catastrophe. People are going to be yearning for somebody to give them something. And part of it's out of fear of dying because they lack. And so the part of the discernment is make sure that we're not making decisions out of fear. And that's why the only way you get there is faith in Christ. You have to have faith in Christ so you're not fearful.
Yeah, and recognize the methodology of the enemy, right? So you might not understand all the machinations. Like, they're not going to make it easy for us to understand the implications of the digital currency, the central bank, digital currency, whatever. There's going to be all kinds of, oh, this is perfect, this is great, this is wonderful, right? Or there's no choice but, or okay, but look at the methodology of how they're introducing it, because that's extremely important to know if it's of God and it's something that we should embrace. So but that's maybe a different live stream. I mean, there's a lot to talk about there, but there's so much that we could talk about to avoid, not to totally avoid, but to assist us so that we're not in a very difficult and compromised position. So St. Paisius talks about it's really good to have an acre or two with some olive trees, and be able to kind of have a garden, or to have some basic way. He's talking about Greeks, of course, everybody has a village, somebody from the village, so it's a little different than Americans, but he's just pointing to the need that stay grounded, be a part of a community. Don't don't entrap yourself if possible. Try to prepare yourself to remain, like normal life. But they want to push us into, smart cities.
Yes.
And they want to push us into this whole way of life, which really is going to be very difficult to avoid the next step in the whole process. So I think there is some wisdom in the Amish. There is some wisdom in the old way, because we used to live from the work of our hands, most people in the villages, right? And they would have food throughout the winter. They wouldn't rely on the supermarket.
Right.
They could go without. So we all live from the supermarket today. So it's like the water. You turn off the faucet. The water's gone. We don't know where we're going to get the food the next day. So there are some practical things we could do to at least allow ourselves the ability to have a little more time and a little less fear to how we're going to encounter the manipulation that's going to come. But I think, anyway, we're getting into another realm, another discussion.
One more thing. When you're talking about, or I mentioned the remaking of the Imago Dei into the machine. Well, I've spoke about the atrophication that's occurring amongst humanity in the last really 10 years due to overly dependence on smart technology. So there was a study on middle school kids being able to read an analog clock. Half of them or more couldn't even read an analog clock. What about people's navigation skills? Because they use maps, Google Maps or Apple Maps, they have no orientation in the world. Reading levels are dropping. IQ levels, both of those are dropping for the first time in American history. IQ, 2 years in a row, average IQ has dropped in America. So the irony is, in my thesis about being remade in the image, is it has to destroy the image of God, which means your ability to engage in all these natural activities.
Yes.
Be able to remember, right? This is why scrolling, and I'm as guilty as anybody else, but I'm very conscious of it. Scrolling too much on the phone, especially in the morning, hits you with too many dopamine hits, and you will not be able to focus on something. You will not be able to read a book for a long time. You're not be able to reflect and contemplate, because your mind, you'll be able to think of something for about 15 seconds and then, oh, I need to do this, or, oh, I was thinking about this. And your mind just keeps fluttering back and forth. Well, you're already being influenced by the machine here. And in a sense, you're already destroying the natural human ontology that God made you to have.
And you're playing into the transhumanist anthropology in a way, right? You're lost in your head. You're lost in your thoughts. You're looking, you're not, the whole human experience is limited to word machine contact. I mean, there's touch grass or whatever it is that they say. There is some truth in that, right?
Did you see this trend on Gen Z where they call it, what was it? I forget the way they frame it, but essentially just sitting in silence. And this is like a trend because they're so inundated with technology that there's like on TikTok, they would just sit with no stimulation for like 15 minutes and they consider this sort of a spiritual activity. Well, my God, if we're here, like that's the thing is we as Orthodox Christians, you need to be able to sit in silence or at least work in silence. Right. A problem, and I'm just as guilty as other people, is you go to work and then you turn something on in the background or you have something. No, stop that. You got to reset the dopamine hits on your brain. Work in silence, sit in silence. And for me, that's when I feel like, I don't want to sound like a Protestant, but I get inspiration. I feel like I get thoughts and ideas that if I was too focused in the technology, I wouldn't get. I have to still myself. And in that,
I hope people run to the things that are going to be spiritually beneficial through the internet and through the phone and through just get off after that. Like do as little as you can otherwise. Right. So it's a tool and you're getting informed, you're getting, the books that you need, you're getting the lectures that you need, but otherwise get off because it's like becoming attached to anything, if you're attached to it, you're not going to easily be able to cut with it. And you've got to always be free of these things. You cannot become slaves to them in any way, whether it be, and this is a kind of drug. It's a similar thing, right? In terms of the mind, it's playing on the same aspect of the mind. So anyway, we're getting a little into getting nitty gritty. Why don't we open it up to questions? I'm sure there's tons of questions. I see 14 already. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to, because of my problems with my browser and stuff, I'm not going to be able to go over to Crowdcast and some other platforms to get questions. So if you're over at Crowdcast, or if you're over at any other of the platforms, Wix or I'm not Wix, the orthodoxethos.com, come over to YouTube and submit your question at least. Everybody can do that. And we'll start with the super chats here. Let's start right here with this person. I'm not sure what this is. RSD, thank you for the donation. Father Peter, bless. Question for both you and Dr. Harry. How much closer have the recent events between Constantinople and Rome brought us back to proverbial Babylon? Dr. Harry, is this part of the link between the ex-humanist agenda and one world religion? Yeah, we didn't actually talk about perennialism. One of the questions I was thinking about asking you is, how does perennialism play into the transhumanist vision of things? Does it, or is it just parallel?
Well, I kind of touched on it when I mentioned that transhumanists don't see the rest of the world religions like everybody needs to convert to transhumanism. They believe that they'll blend it into
that's right. Yes.
the other world religion. So it's inherently perennialist. But my point, just like the Joe Rogan example I highlighted, that is, if you are adopting a modernist, to use an Orthodox term, phronema, you will naturally move towards transhumanism as an ultimate conclusion. Just like Joe Rogan's moving from his liberal state to a more conservative, state of mind. He's now going to a Christian church. And when he's pressed on Christianity and how much he likes going to his Protestant church, he says, yeah, and the second coming of Christ is going to be the AGI, and then he goes on to why it all makes sense. And it's all the similarities that I'm highlighting are the inversions, but he doesn't see it as an inversion. He sees it as a correlation. So,
which just drives home how important it is to be Orthodox.
Yes. Because you have to get the mind out of modernity, right? And people just don't realize how, and me too, I'm still in it, right? But we all are. We're born in it. We are fish in an ocean here. It's the water we swim in. But
Father Seraphim Rose says you got to be able to admit that you're breathing in the pestilence. Otherwise, you're dead on arrival, right?
Yes.
First step. I am a part of the problem. I'm a part of this society. I'm a part of this mentality, and so that's the first step. You got to recognize the sickness.
And regarding the question, I would say you would probably, Father Peter, be able to speak more accurately and eloquently about this, but I do see the attempt at a union with Constantinople and Rome as setting this. I mean, Pope Leo has been explicit in the last couple weeks that the whole point of his reign as the Pope is to essentially validate all world religions as moving towards the same thing. And in that same 2-week span, we have Patriarch Bartholomew, celebrating the Council of Nicaea with him. And then the next day he's going to one of the Muslim mosques. He doesn't pray in it, but then he's validating Islam as another authentic form towards God. It's all setting the stage. I mean, all you need, and that's where the perennialism people say, well, do you think that everybody's going to convert to the Antichrist religion? It's like, what? You don't have to convert. You stay with what you're doing. You just have to adopt the fundamental precepts. And it does. And for the person who does it, they don't think, the Muslim that is okay with transhumanism and AI and technology, that's all they need. That's the precept that need. They don't have to stop with their prayer rule and all this different, going on their Hajj. They can do all that.
Perennialism does not, and it actually is quite dogmatic about it, does not expect you to be removed from your religion. No. You stay there.
Yes.
You absolutely stay there, and you don't mix. There's no mix and match. It's not syncretistic. However, you must accept and recognize that the other religions, and they have the particular ones that they recognize, etc., Sufi, and they are past up the mountain. And if you have eyes to see, if you're brilliant like Fritjof Schuon was, or Guénon, or all these people, then you'll see that actually, yes, the words are different, yes, the trappings are different, the rituals are different, but it's the same meaning, it's the same message, the same God that's revealing Himself, etc., etc. So there will be no organized one world religion. One world religion means that all religions will be seen as one.
Yes.
That's what one world religion means. And does the Pope, the previous and the present and the future, does he buy into that? 100%. Have we already forgotten what what Francis said in the Philippines? He said exactly what perennialism says. He preached perennialism. And he said they're like different languages. You just speak different languages. You speak Buddhist, I speak Christian, the other speaks Judaism. What? What are you talking about? It is so far from the Christian message. It's hard to imagine. So no, perennialism, I think, remembering what you said earlier, it will dovetail easily with an embrace of a utopia. It won't have a problem for the most part. It won't have a problem. Of course, particular Christians and other religions could have problems with it if they actually take their religion seriously. Because I think that even some of the older religions would have problems with some of the anthropology, but really, for the most part, people are so superficial. I was blown away again by this discussion I had with the rabbi, just how far he is from anything like classical Judaism, and yet he is a rabbi. So it does not really matter that they're going to reshape. They were reshaping all of the religions to fit into the contemporary paradigm. It's not hard. Yeah.
What were your thoughts about the veneration of the Council of Nicaea in Constantinople?
Well, look, I mean, it's really not hard to see that nothing happened there, and more of the same that has always happened. And I would say, in a way, the fact that people thought something happened, in other words, a positive mood toward orthodoxy, which was some of the commentary was, oh, look, the Pope's moving toward orthodoxy. He didn't recite the Filioque. Well, he recited the next day at his Latin Mass,
exactly,
or his Roman Catholic Mass in Constantinople. He did every day he does liturgy. He recites it. What do you guys think? He's just doing that for us. It's just a political ploy. Exactly. And nothing changes for them. You look, here's the thing people don't understand. And the same thing with, what's his name? I forget the guy's name is in the Greek dies. He just posted this thing from the No, his acolyte who's always online, Evagoras. Yeah, so he comes out and he says how wonderful the Finnish statement was with regard to the LGBT, right? Now this is and I responded and I said, he said something like every Orthodox church can get behind this statement, of allowing in for the various people of sexual orientation. And I said, the Orthodox can get behind the following. Every person who comes to the church is repenting, whether he has sexual disorientation, ecumenism, philetism, or whatever the ism is that he's suffering from. The common denominator of every Christian is he's repenting. In fact, and so ecumenism is basically, and we're talking from Vatican II on, it's the idea that there is no need to repent. No one is going to repent. There's no Roman Catholics who are going to repent of the Filioque. It's going to be just a realignment, presentation, a new presentation, a new way to consider these things. And that's exactly what they're telling us. If you pay attention, they're telling us that they're not going to do away with the papacy. They're going to put the papacy in the context of Catholicism, right? So he's going to be infallible and primate over the Roman Catholic part of the church. And they made that distinction in Vatican II. It's Vatican II is there's the church, which is Catholicism, but then there's the wider church, the incomplete or partial church. And all this ecclesiology is exactly the idea that no one's going to repent of anything. We're just going to merge and we're going to figure out some kind of formula which will be acceptable to each one. And that's what they did in Vatican II. You literally read paragraph 1 and they say this. You read paragraph 2, they say, it seems like the opposite. And you're like, how did they do that? How do they do this? It's like cognitive dissonance. Well, one paragraph is talking about this part of the church, Catholicism. Right. The other paragraph is talking about the other part of the church, the rest of us. It's mind-boggling from an Orthodox perspective, but it makes perfect sense for this new ecclesiology and this new vision. So ecumenism has no repentance, all right? So that's right there, it's Antichrist.
Right.
You know that it's leading to Antichrist because all of us are repenting. And everywhere you see it's a parish level and a political level, if you see people saying, I don't need to change, I don't need to repent, I don't need to die and rise to become Orthodox Christian, that's ecumenism. That's the spirit of Antichrist, right? Because there's no regeneration, there's no transfiguration without death to the old man. And so everybody's repenting. The priest, the bishop, the patriarch, the last lady, everybody is continually on the path of return to God. Why are you any different? You have heretical doctrines. You need to leave them at the door.
Exactly.
It's just that simple. This is not rocket science, but it's rocket science. So what they did in Constantinople is nothing. There's nothing new there. It's the same old, same old. No movement toward orthodoxy. It's like smoke and mirrors, like ball bearings and mirrors. That's what happened there. And everybody's like, oh, wow, we're coming together. Where and how are we coming together? I didn't see any of that.
No, that's exactly how I feel about it too.
Yeah, no, there's no repentance. So there's no.
And ecumenism, it's a major dogma of modernity. I mean, in 2025, outside the Orthodox world, it's normal. But you just say, no, no, Orthodoxy is true. No, all the other ones are wrong. Like that rubs the majority of people the wrong way. Where just 100 years ago in America, if you asked a Protestant, is Christianity true? Yes, and that's the only religion that's true. It was just common expression, even in the Protestant Enlightenment experiment of America. It just shows you that in the 100-year transformation to get to where we're at, to be in 21st century modernity, they're all these unspoken dogmas that Orthodoxy, ironically, is the only one that's butting up against, to show you that this is the true church and this is the false religion.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's what I experienced in this discussion yesterday, that the only heretical, terrible thing you could do in that discussion was to say there's truth. And when you depart from the truth, you depart from God. Yep. Absolutely anathema to that discussion yesterday with the rabbi and with the other people. And then if you hurt anybody's feelings, that was the other terrible, terrible thing. And it's got, it's just like, I wanted to say, but there's a really famous Jew who said facts don't care about your feelings, but you guys forgot about him. I mean, he's kind of a famous Jew. Anyway, we'll get back to the questions. For the expenses associated with podcasting, thank you very much for the donation. Appreciate that. And Caesar coming through with 10 Orthodox Ethos memberships. Thank you very much. As always, Gorilla Biscuit Baby. Hey, we'll take these names people give. I love these names. Thank you very much for the membership, as well as Gary, always giving the membership. Everybody, every week we got people giving memberships, and it's great. Thank you very much for the membership. And then one more, Akathist. And now this question. Be in the world, but not of it. That means you can use technology, work, raise a family, and live normally while refusing the parts of modern culture that pull you away from God. Thanks for the donation, by the way. Thoughts on that? And if there's any nuance that we need to add to that statement.
No, I would say that's generally the case. That's why you have to be in the church, because the church gives you the framework in which to engage with all these things, right? Because work can become an idol. Technology can become an idol. Your family can become an idol for some people. So all this has to be put in its right context. God, family, then maybe work, then maybe technology, but put it in its right context. And as Father Peter and myself already said, technology cannot be evil in of itself. It doesn't have a will. Only noetic entities and us can be truly evil. It's a willful aversion and movement away from God. So these technologies are, and this is where Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, right? Just the fact that we're on these digital technologies all the time, it's altering the ways in which we engage in the world. A poignant example is that there's recently a study about Gen Alpha and how, because they use and communicate with AI so often, like ChatGPT or Grok, they are beginning to speak like an AI, because that is the entity they communicate back and forth with the most.
Wow, that's amazing. I hadn't thought about that. That makes sense. What's the future holding for us? It's going to be a massive division. That it makes total sense now, just looking at the future where things are going to go, that they're going to consider the Christians to be, just not capable to live in society. You people are going to be so freaking different, like you're going to be so different in your vision. So again, not just in their worldview and that, hey, there's actually a truth but in the mannerisms, the way that society is going to develop, at least Western society, there's going to be mannerisms and ideas and ways that are going to be just anathema to most people. We're going to be forced out. I would only say about technology is that, look, there's technology that's very simple, and then there's technology that's very advanced. And what happens is we become dependent, or we become manipulated by that technology. So all technology is not equal, right? So be on guard. Yes, you can use, he says, you use technology, work, raise a family, and live normally. Theoretically, yes, but you've got to examine that work and that technology and that society to say, is this in the realm of Christian normality, if you want to even use the term normality? Like, everything needs discernment, right? Just because it's theoretically possible doesn't mean that actually in that case, in your particular life, it's a work for good. So I don't know. I'm a little more reticent. I'm a little more reluctant to just kind of say, go for it. I think you need to be very cognizant of the eroding factor of it, right? Like I said with the Amish, they didn't say, well, what's the problem? I mean, just talking is talking, right? We're talking on the phone. We're talking in person. They didn't say that. They said, how is this going to affect our community? Now, they got a lot, again, they got a lot of problems, but they understood, like, there's almost nothing more important than our community.
Right.
They didn't think like individuals. That they were not individualists. They were communalists, if you like. And Christianity is that way. We actually care about our community. We want to be a part of a community. We don't want it to be dissolved or destroyed. So it is really important that you discern with the proper criteria how you're going to allow a kind of technology or a kind of way of life to enter into your life. Yep. And then how is it going to change you or affect you? I think we're a little naive in that, right? In that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Sorry to harp. I'm a harper, and it's not very fun sometimes. People get sick of my voice, and I get that. Because of the Ukraine changeover, people might think that Constantinople and New York patriarchs are run by the U.S. State Department. Not saying they are, just what people might be thinking. Thanks for the donation, James Johnson. Not sure if it's a question, but it is a super chat. So any thoughts on that?
I would say there's an interesting article called The CIA's Patriarch, which talked a little bit about Patriarch, I believe it was Athenagoras before Bartholomew.
Yeah. Well, there's Iakovos before. As far as patriarchs, you mean?
Before, Constantinople
was Demetrios, and before him was Athenagoras.
Okay, so Athenagoras was the first one, and it was out of the necessity of post-World War II Europe that built a relationship with the CIA. But the article goes into interesting conversation about potential ties with the State Department and the CIA with Patriarch Bartholomew, his friendship with Mike Pompeo, who seems to get an Orthodox award every year. There's just interesting things. And again, I'm not here to criticize any hierarchy of the church, but that's what Peter said. It's all about discernment. And I believe the greatest antidote to all this stuff is just becoming more Orthodox, because that's what allows you to see it. Yeah,
which means following the saints.
Yes.
That's what it means to become more Orthodox. You imitate the saints who are little Christs, and they're given to us to guide us to Christ. And so by the way, just as a newsflash, the bishops have to follow the saints too. All of us have to follow the saints. I mean, I don't know if anybody, people sometimes like the priests and bishops think they don't have to follow the saints. No, we actually have to follow the saints too. And so the saints pretty much are 100% against ecumenism. It's a strange thing that you can't find a saint who's an ecumenist. Right. So, I don't know what's going on exactly. What's going on in the church today? It's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance. We have ecumenists who are just bishops are total into ecumenism, and yet you're like, well, who are you following again?
Right.
You guys didn't get the memo from Athos. It didn't hit your news wire there. So absolutely, unfortunately, we have always the temptation of political power. It's always trying to manipulate the church, always has been. And it's very much real today. So, all right, here's a question from Penelope. She says, David, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and your website doesn't seem to allow me to purchase a copy of your book. Should I just purchase it on Amazon?
I'm not sure what would be causing you to prevent it, but I would actually ask you to purchase on Amazon, because shipping to Australia is very expensive. And so because Amazon has factories in Australia, if you purchase my book through Amazon, they'll print it in Australia. It's much cheaper.
Yeah. That's a great point. Are you a cradle Christian? If no, what illuminated you to the truth?
I'm not cradle Orthodox. I grew up very kind of conservative Methodist. Methodism has a long history in my family, from multiple pastors and Methodist theologians. So my family has a very strong identity with the Methodist Church. It was once I get into college, I actually took a course on the Bible, and then I learned all the sort of secular critical theory regarding scripture. And it was the first time I heard about the Epic of Gilgamesh and Noah and multiple authorship theory of the Gospels, and really rocked this sort of naive Christian faith I grew up with, and really got into Eastern mysticism, and that led into psychedelics. And so through much of my 20s, I spent 2 summers in China studying Mandarin and Chinese culture. I was just fascinated with Eastern mysticism and psychedelics, very much like the Alan Watts, Terence McKenna worldview. It wasn't until my PhD program when I was forced to take a course on Orthodox history and theology, because I had written a paper on a book called The Psychedelic Gospels. It's actually written by Dr. Jerry Brown, in which he identifies all these frescoes in Western Europe that insinuate that the original Eucharist or the Eucharist is a psychedelic mushroom. And so I wrote this paper and came to the conclusion that his research proves that the Cathars, a Gnostic heresy, carried a tradition that Gnosticism had from the Bogomils and the Paulicians and the Tondrakians in Armenia to Western Europe, where they did engage in these practices. But I wasn't a believer in Christ yet. And I thought, well, that's clearly not the actual original Eucharist. John Marco Allegro makes this argument in the 70s after reading the Dead Sea Scrolls. It became very popular. And so I took this course on Orthodoxy, where I had to read church fathers, again, as a non-believer, the history of the church, the schism, differences between Western Christianity, and then all these contemporary theologians, Stanilow, Losky, Florovsky, Yanaros, Bulgakov, all these different people. And I came to the conclusion after that course that Orthodox, I've never heard Christianity expressed in that way. And so for me, I'm an academic. I'm in Berkeley, California. I mean, the height of degeneracy, right? And wow, and just was kind of blown away by the course and learning about Orthodoxy. And that weighed on me for about that summer. It was a spring semester. And by the fall, I began to pray again. And I was basically a Protestant Orthodox. So I believed in Orthodox theology, but I didn't attend an Orthodox church. I really wasn't attending church at all. And then I went to my first Orthodox service at Holy Virgin Cathedral in San Francisco, where I saw St. John of Shanghai, saw a full hierarchical liturgy for my very first one, and was just blown away by the Orthodox worship experience. And then that led to me going more regularly. And then once I moved out of California, immediately became a catechumen, and then I joined the church in 2019.
That's awesome. I wanted to put, I don't know, do you have anywhere online the table of contents that people can see for the book?
I do not have the table of contents. You recommend putting that online?
I do. We put a little excerpt in the table of contents on online for people, and I'm gonna put it on the screen here if you don't mind. Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm totally fine with it.
All right, we'll put it on screen in a minute here so people can get a sense. I actually wanted to go through it earlier and I just forgot, but my technical issues here are always cute. Look at that. I'm trying to get it over to my. There it is. It's coming over. Until that happens, let me ask another question here. This is from Kirkpatrick. Can we become too enamored with the end times and try to see the Antichrist in all things? Where is the balance between being alert and seeing the Antichrist everywhere?
I mean, honestly, this question's more a Father Peter question than me. I am not clergy. But I would say I am very interested in the visions and the prophecies from the saints and elders. But the way I engage with it as an Orthodox Christian is very different than maybe a Protestant mindset. So I look at them as signs or signposts through the timeline of history itself as we approach the telos of history, the Omega, which is Christ. But I think it is important. I know it's a debated topic in Orthodoxy, and you don't need to get into, I do some eschatological streams. You don't need to get into that to dive deeper in your faith. I always tell people, if you're prone to anxiety, if you're new to Orthodox, do not watch eschatology streams. However, if you are Orthodox, and at least in my experience, in my faith, I have found it deeply meaningful and deeply insightful that when things like Israel bombing the nuclear facilities of Iran, with Turkey's expansion in the Aegean against the Greeks. There's multiple, the Ukraine-Russian war. There's interesting things happening in our world today that line up with things our saints have said 20, 30, 40 years ago. That I think is insightful for an Orthodox Christian. But the whole point of eschatology from an Orthodox perspective, as Father Peter hammers all the time, is repentance. It's not to cause anxiety. It's for you to repent. And in repentance, we push the end times back, right? So you have agency. You have agency regarding all this stuff, but it's your own spiritual life. That's the agency. It's not a political movement. It's not voting in the next politician to rescue us from it. It's you rescuing yourself through Christ, and in the hope, rescuing the people around you, your family and friends.
So people need to pay attention what David does over there on the streams. He's done a bunch of them. He's quoting the saints.
Yes, exactly.
So if the saints said it, we probably should read it at some point in our life. It's not a bad idea. And so it does not, you're not excessively focusing on the eschaton by reading the scriptures, which talk about the eschaton, or reading the saints that talk about this. Why did the saints say it? Why did the Lord talk about the end times? Why is there a book of a revelation? It's because it's for us in our salvation. There's no other reason. Everything is given for us in our salvation. So there's some role it plays in our salvation. I know Kirkpatrick is here all the time. He knows that. I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's important to realize this is a part, not the main meal. It's probably a dessert, but it's on the table. And you got to be cognizant of it because it's for your salvation that is given. And one of the main reasons it's given is that we do not fall into temptation. We remain vigilant. It actually helps in our becoming agripni in Greek, which is, I guess, vigilance or watchfulness, nipsi, right? These are really, really basic in the spiritual life. It's the whole treatises on nipsis, watchfulness over the mind. Yeah, we're talking about the intellect. Yes, we're talking about prayer, but it's not exclusive of the signs of the times. You remember that the Lord said to the Jews, you're blind, you don't see the signs of the times. He was talking about his first coming, right? Same thing's applicable to the second coming. He says, in those days will I find faith. What does it mean to find faith in the end times? Trust in Christ. And we trust Christ that he's telling us the truth about the end times, that he sent saints to alert us to the end times. It's always mind-boggling for me to meet Orthodox Christians who say, don't talk about those things. Don't talk about Revelation. Don't talk about Apocalypse. When the Lord himself talked about it, he gave us the book of Revelation, and he gave us saints to talk about it. And the whole point was that he did it because it's really important for us in the end times to have eyes to see and not fall into delusion. So it's not something you should spend a lot of time on, but you shouldn't ignore it and act like it doesn't matter. That's right. Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right. What effect will World War III and the upcoming growth of the Orthodox Church have on the globalist agenda and transhumanism movement? Will the return to Constantinople negatively impact these? That's an interesting question.
I mean, I haven't speculated on Constantinople being returned to the Greeks as it relates to the transhumanist end goal. I mean, the way that I see it is the paradox of God itself, as we talked about. And correct me, Father, if I'm wrong, because you know probably more than I do about a lot of this stuff. But the general timeline is the World War III occurs. It causes global chaos. During that and after that, we have a golden era of orthodoxy. We may right now be in the beginning of this golden era. Maybe not. Maybe this is something different. So again, we're Orthodox. We don't make these dramatic proclamations about things that are occurring. But
and the time is not. We don't focus on the time of things. Yeah. That's really important. We don't know when these things will happen because it depends on repentance, as you said earlier.
Right. So only God knows the time and the day. We are agents. Are repentful agents during this timeline, but World War III occurs, generally divided China, Russia, Iran versus basically NATO, the US, and Israel. We already kind of see those sides divvied up. We don't know when and where, but during that process, Orthodoxy is going to spread across the world. I've heard elders say the Orthodox gospel has not reached every corner of the earth. Maybe the gospel, the general gospel has, but not the Orthodox gospel, which is the prerequisite for us to actually enter into the reign of Antichrist. That has to occur first. And so this golden age is the process in which that occurs. And many people, essentially, it's God offering everybody the opportunity again for salvation, that orthodoxy will be on, as you said, the spread on the table. It will be there for everyone if they want that. That is the prerequisite before we get there. So during that process, do I think transhumanism is going to excel and catalyze its effort? Absolutely. That's the whole point of my book, is that these things are going to be in parallel. So as orthodoxy, the meaning crisis, the post-secular society, as we move forward, orthodoxy is going to grow. That's how I open the book, is highlighting the immense growth of orthodoxy in America, and then the immense fascination and growth and influence of transhumanism in America. So
Yes.
as we move forward, those things are going to become mainstream options. Orthodoxy is already becoming mainstream. I believe it's going to become more and more and more mainstream. And the tension between these is going to be very palpable. A pre-modern mystical Christian worldview versus a modernist rationalist fantasy worldview. And so all that infrastructure is going to be built, I believe. Again, correct me, Father, you'd be more insightful than I am. That transhumanist infrastructure is going to be built while orthodoxy is also growing, excelling, converting people all across the world. And then then we get into the stage is set, essentially.
I asked Metropolitan Neophytos years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was in Greece and I was thinking of coming back to America at the time. I said, help me understand something. I don't understand how this is going to work. I said, there's just prophecies and all this orthodoxy is going to be like it's called an analambi in Greek, which is basically a showing forth of orthodoxy, a mission to the world, etc. How's it going to work if this whole ascent of Antichrist continues and all this globalization continues? And he just kind of stopped and he said, "Well, it's already like that. It's just going to continue." Like he just goes like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, yes, of course they're going to coexist. Now we can't really make sense exactly how it's going to work because this globalist system wants total domination, right? It wants a global monetary system, and I think eventually that will take place. And the prophecies are that this will only be for a time, that there'll be a great mission, and then again there'll be apparently there's some prophecies that say this is going to be an amazing time to live in on many levels. But one of the great temptations will be there will be a great materialistic advancement or ease for a lot of people, and that will bring again corruption of morals, corruption of and laxity and worldliness and apostasy. So it's a cycle, and we see this throughout church history. That we go through these cycles. I mean, Russia is one of the great examples of the 20th century. You had this ascent of the Russian Empire. You had then the corruption of it through a lot of secularization, Western ideas, worldliness. Dostoevsky saw it all coming. St. John of Kronstadt saw it all coming. And then the Bolsheviks came, and it was like they felt like they were before the Antichrist. They felt like they were in the time of the Antichrist. It was a type of Antichrist in the 30s, 20s, and 30s. And then they went through this terrible purification process, then again reborn, Orthodoxy again reborn. So this is not, what we're talking about is not all that crazy. It's happened probably again and again throughout church history. It's going to happen one more time before the end. And it's got to be seen, even though there'll be political side to this whole thing. It's not about that. Right. And it's not about some return to a great empire, or if people focus on, the Greeks and taking back Constantinople, that is one portion, and it's not the main portion. Christ does everything for the salvation of the world. And of course, it's all about the church being able to be shared across the planet. And I think that it's the same. It's actually a continuation of a process going on for quite some time. And it's a separation of the sheep from the goats. Yeah. It's a clarity, because for the longest time in the West, there was not clarity. There was not an option. It was always two bad choices: papal Protestantism or Reformed Protestantism. That was it. You had to choose both heretical, both, not the church. Now there is an ability to get this, and the dissolution of the Western culture, essentially, and Western Christian vision into this transhumanist thing. It creates a stark choice, two choices that are very starkly opposed. Whereas papal Protestantism and Reformed Protestantism are two sides of the same coin, and it's very murky. Whereas this is going to be very stark. And so when that period ends, when orthodoxy, again, people become worldly and the church, fades again toward the end and the rise of Antichrist, it'll be so stark that the church will be, as it says in Revelation, chased into the wilderness. It'll be impossible for the two to be reconciled. And so it's going to continue like that, and then it's going to end in the descent of Antichrist. Anyway, we're off topic.
And to your point, real quick, just to your point, people always ask me when I do those eschatology streams, well, why are you talking about Antichrist? There's already multiple Antichrists in history. And to your point, yes, they're typologies, they're types of Antichrist. And to your point, it's the same thing. It's the separating the wheat from the chaff. And the difference is, what I always highlight to people, is it's now global, right? The Bolshevik Revolution was localized. Nero and Diocletian were localized. It's still the same process of sifting between the true and the false. The difference now is the digital technology and the digital world we live in is global. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it universal. That's what makes it setting the stage for the true entity who has not arrived yet, but that's where we're moving to. It's now global.
And it has to be for the Antichrist, because we know he's going to be a global leader. There's going to be one world government. There's going to be one world monetary system. And so these have to be types before the end. I think that, but that doesn't mean that, because the Apostle John says there's already Antichrist among us. One of my questions for you was, can you say one of the cornerstones of the whole thing is what St. John said is the essence of the Antichrist, which is a denial of the theanthropic person of Jesus Christ?
Oh, absolutely.
That is a cornerstone to transhumanism, right? There's no believers in the theanthropic nature of Jesus Christ and his church among the transhumanists.
No, because that's who they're going to be.
Right. They are
the incarnated God.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's huge, right? That's another confirmation that this is really going to be the ideology and the utopia promised by the Antichrist.
Yeah. It's apotheosis versus theosis.
Right.
And most people are going to choose apotheosis.
In your book, you contrast transhumanism's tech-driven self-deification, Singularity, AI gods, with Orthodox theosis. How do today's AI ethics debates in Silicon Valley echo the fallout?
From the AI ethicists that I've looked at, I mean, this is where, the presupping, the tag, the worldview, the phronema, nobody in the AI ethicist world is coming from an Orthodox worldview. I mean, most of these people are atheists. That's why effective altruism is like the leading sort of moral, ethical standpoint in Silicon Valley, which is just utilitarianism exacerbated by technology, right? They just believe utilitarianism. We create technologies that ease suffering. So in transhumanism, when you look at their ethics, it's all about easing suffering, which again, to me, is a destruction of the Imago Dei. What is the one thing that us Orthodox constantly talk about as a blessing when we're facing is struggles? When I go to the gym and work out, I need to make my muscles suffer and break down so they build back bigger. That's the same thing with our spiritual life. And so I think there's this really nefarious aspect within transhumanism, and this includes many academic and secular movements that believe that what we have to do is we need total pleasure, that anything that annihilates your pleasure is evil. And that suffering is evil. And I have multiple people in my book I highlight that talk about how suffering is evil. So when you're talking about AI ethicists, most of them are talking about how to limit suffering. And that includes any type of suffering, spiritual suffering, emotional suffering. And so there's a guy named David Pearce in Britain, former Oxford scholar, who he has what he calls negative utilitarianism. And he dreams of the day, just so you get a feel for how out of the world these people are. They want to alter through implants carnivorous animals so that the animals they prey upon will be able to flourish better. because they believe that's a form of suffering. And so he's a big vegetarian and all this different stuff. They want to hardwire the animal kingdom itself so it doesn't suffer. In his paper, he argues that in the future, we're going to have electrodes in your brain so that even when you do suffer, you experience it as pleasure. And we can do all the things we need to make sure that you don't experience suffering in any way.
You can't get more antithetical to the cross than that.
Exactly, right? So they want to put you, that's where the whole coon pod metaphor, they literally want to put you in a place where they can pacify you to every desire that you have so that you will not search for something greater, and you will be a cog in the machine. And essentially you will be like the Matrix, a battery to the AI. You will be a battery. I mean, Facebook already created bed sheets that it takes the thermal heat of your body and converts it into electricity. Which, I mean, I'm not saying they're explicitly promoting the Matrix idea, but that idea, the fact that they're developing technology that they can grab energy from your physical body and power electronics with it, that is the premise of the Matrix.
So one of the things I have said, I think we said on your show, and I like to repeat because I think it just drives home just how inverted this is that they're dreaming of a day when they can live forever, right? To live in this world forever. That's what they're promising. There's going to be somehow in some form they're going to beat death, right? Isn't that right? Isn't that one of their hopes, their dreams?
Yeah.
So what I said was that's exactly what hell is, because hell is to stay in a fallen state, separated from God forever.
Right. No, and I highlight that in chapter 4 is that immortality, technological immortality from an Orthodox perspective is hell. It's the annihilation of the imago Dei that God put inside of each and one of us. You reshape that in the form of the machine, which I argue to the point that you were making about the whisperings of demons influencing the development of these technologies is the devil and the demons cannot create it on their own. They have, we can create through our imago Dei. Therefore we have to be the instrument. We are the necessary instrument to build what I call the inverted body or the cybernetic skeleton of Christ, or of the devil. I'm sorry, because the devil isn't omnipotent. The devil isn't omnipresent, but theoretically, now again, I don't believe transhumanism will happen, but I do believe in the indwelling of entity of like non-animate things with demons. I do believe in ritualistic magic.
The Antichrist will be the fulfillment of that. He'll be the ultimate fulfillment of that.
And so is it totally crazy to believe that nefarious powers that be, or let's pretend and speculate that there are quote unquote elite Satanists, and somewhere in the world they win this AI race? Is it crazy to believe that they would indwell that through a ritualistic process with a noetic entity, so that it would then would that then be the sort of AGI that they speculate? Again, I don't believe transhumanism can occur, but I do believe that a totally connected grid, a global grid powered by a single AI system, if Satan were to be inside of it, so to speak, he would be able to know what's in your bank account, what's going on in Rio de Janeiro, protest in Beijing, all at the same moment. He could open your garage door through his mind. Both the Antichrist will be human, but the AI system itself could be that's why I call it a cybernetic skeleton. It could be a house for the demons themselves.
If the demons can possess human beings and essentially speak through them and control. We see this in the possessions when Elder Achelios, his name just escaped me, in Greece was doing exorcisms, and they're speaking out and they're crying out and they're essentially enslaved, or they're not free and their voices are not their own. That's human beings made in the image of God. How much more for an inanimate object couldn't he possess that? I don't know why there's any reason to believe he can't, right?
I totally agree with you. And I do believe when the Corpus Hermeticum in the book of Asclepius talks about that, I do believe I just did a stream on St. Nicholas when the next village said we have a pagan god inside of a cypress tree. I believe that actually occurred, that somebody performed a ritual and gave the cypress tree, dedicated the cypress tree to be sort of Horcrux, just like in Harry Potter, an inanimate object that a spiritual entity can then have a sort of presence within.
In our village, 240 years ago, there was a major miracle in the village that I was a priest in Greece, Petrokerisa. We commemorated every year with the coming of the Holy Cross from Mount Athos. The village, it said, was people were dying from sicknesses, and there was a tremendous demonic presence. And they called on the fathers from Athos to come with the Holy Cross. When the cross got close to the village, just on the edge of it, everybody heard this like massive sound, like a bomb going off, and the trees were exploding. Literally, that's what they say in the tradition, because the Holy Cross came close and the demons fled. So there's all kinds of stories in church history where there's a physical side to the demons. Why? Because only God is ultimately immaterial, right? Everything created has some kind of materiality to it.
Right.
And that's why the demons fight you have saints who are fighting with the demons, right? Physically. There's some mystery, but the Lord himself, after his resurrection, walked through walls. So there's a mystery to here. There's a physicality that also has a materiality to it, not like our gross physicality that we have, in this world. Anyway, this is another question. I'm just saying that, yes, it's possible for demons to possess inanimate objects. I don't think that's a stretch in our demonology.
No.
Do you think God will allow the coming external microwave manipulation of our emotions, psyche, and the blocking of our spiritual faculties that is being rolled out? What's he mean by microwave manipulations? Is something I'm not familiar with?
I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to, but it could be the idea that there's sort of energetic weapons that can be pointed and directed at people that cause memory loss, or a failure of memory retention and stuff like that can cause people to be in a daze. DARPA's talked about that. So we know those type of, what they're called, energy directed weapons. We know that those exist. I don't know if that's what he's referring to, but specifically concerning the question, there it is. The blocking of your emotions and psyche, I believe, are going to be signposts on every person who says yes to transhumanism. That is ultimately what's going to happen. That is essentially the what I consider the destruction of the Imago Dei. The machine is going to think for you. The machine is going to feel for you. And therefore you've lost all, divine ontological agency in the world. You've literally submitted and given yourself over to the machine.
So that sounds like we're right at the mark of the beast, because that's what is talked about. Those who receive the mark of the beast will not be able to repent.
Yeah.
There's no return after that. So there must be more to it than just something they're under their skin. There's also a spiritual enslavement.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is going to say yes. I mean, there's spiritual possession is a continual saying yes to demons, right? All the tempestuous logismi that we get. You can always repent in that process, right? But we do believe that there's a point of a total hardening of the heart where somebody has said yes to the demons so much that they've said yes to allow them to fully take them over. That is when they're going to need an outside presence, a full exorcism, somebody else to actually assist them because they're too far gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the same process is where transhumanism is going. I mean, it's essentially a mechanical possession. And we right now, maybe some of us are against it, but maybe we end up saying yes to too many things. And the next line in the sand doesn't seem that far away. And then we're there, and the next one doesn't actually seem that far away either. That is a process where you are going to lose your spiritual discernment. You're going to lose a connection with God. You're going to lose emotional and psychological faculties.
Yeah. And it's naive. Yeah. And I just want to say it's naive to think that this is all just going to happen at the end. Like it's a process. It's a long process, 1,000 years to get to the point where we're now before. It's a long process individually and as a society of disintegration and estrangement. So that's why you have to constantly be vigilant and recognize, you may not check out of society because there's a digital ID. I don't know. I mean, in Greece, there's a lot of fathers right now telling everybody, don't take their version of the digital ID on Mount Athos. There's like 7 monasteries, 15, 20, 30 monasteries that signed something. So they're saying, look, it's not the mark of the beast, but don't take it because it's a totalitarian regime, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not going to be the mark of the beast, and therefore, yes, you can take it. But the question is not, it's more subtle than that. Is when do you stop taking it? How do you stop taking it? And I had this conversation with a very good friend of mine, a very important confessor of the faith in the church in Greece, Father Arsenios Viagoftis, who's in the monastery of St. Arsenios. He's written a number of books. He's one of the leaders, I would say, in the Church of Greece. And we had this conversation, I'll never forget it. We're sitting in the car for about an hour and a half. And we're like, this was like 10 years ago, we're talking about this stuff. 15 years ago? I don't remember now. And the question was, if you go too quick and tell the people, check out, they won't endure. Right. They're going to check out. When I say check out, I mean, basically say, I'm not going to be a part of this totalitarian system that's being set up, right? And that's really what is happening. It's a very satanic, militaristic, step-by-step taking over of society is what they're trying to do through technological means to control society. So the question is, if you go too quick and you say, don't take this, and then they're shut out in a way, it's not the mark of the beast, so there's no sin there, right? But then, they're going to be avoiding the further temptations that will come, and that's great. And so we're safe in a way, right? But are they going to make it? I mean, how are they going to live? And can you say that to them? And on what basis? And can you take responsibility? We're talking about pastors here. How do you say to people, yeah, I take responsibility for your well-being now that you can't earn money? Like, how do you do that? You can't. But on the other hand, if you wait too long and you don't say anything and they get further and further, now they're enmeshed in this whole way of life. And they're dependent on the whole technological structure. And now, it's like, how are they going to then say no? Are they going to be able to say no then? And that's exactly what the devil's banking on, that people will just not have the strength to get out of that once they're enmeshed in it and they're dependent on it. Because if we get into a society where there's a basic income for everybody and you're totally reliant on the state for your money and your food, it's kind of hard to walk away from. There's no, I'll go work down, I'll walk down the street and work at another job. There is no other job.
Right. And imagine you have a family and that is the mark of the beast point, right? Imagine, what are you going to do then? You're totally enmeshed in a system. You're totally dependent upon it. I mean, unless you have a community,
yes,
you're going to say yes. You're going to say yes.
And this is where the saints have already told us. St. Gabriel of Georgia famously said, don't be alone. Don't be just a couple people. Be a part of a community. And this is how people always lived. Here's the thing, though. What we're talking about was normal 100 years ago. Nobody thought, this is crazy. You got to live in a community with people and actually like barter. That's the way people live for thousands of years. We say it today, and it's like, are you guys crazy? What, are we going to come Amish? You see how it's happened? Even now, we're totally enmeshed in it. Even now, we've come so far from what normal life was 100 years ago in the village.
Yes.
Right? So it's just, you got to be cognizant of where we are in the whole process. All right. We're going to have to blow through some questions because we're almost up. We're at 3 hours, which usually we kind of check out at about 3 hours. But I wanted to put this on the screen for everybody. Let me get this so we can, So this is the table of contents. And, screenshot it, check it out. It'll give you, a way to understand what you're going to get when you buy the book. But this is serious, deep, analytical, theological, philosophical analysis. I think it's, I'm really excited that this is going to help a lot of people to get out of the matrix. So I'm very excited. I hope a lot of people embrace that. A lot of deep stuff here. I'm really happy that you stuck through it. You got it done. Congratulations.
Yeah, it was I'd say it was a labor of love, but it was difficult to get through, but I do appreciate that. And it is a very academic. So people are asking me to make more of a popular reader. Well, eventually I will, but my goal was, having dove into all this literature, there is not a book. There is not a full orthodox systematic critique of transhumanism and demonstrating what transhumanism is from the orthodox perspective. And I do it. And so if you read it, I never explicitly say I'm Orthodox or make it overly overt that I'm like in favor of Orthodox, but you get it because I'm taking Orthodoxy and using it as the critique of transhumanism. But my goal was to make a book that would still be relevant in 5 to 10 years. That most of everything that I write in it is not going to change. The same trajectory is going to be true. And so I scanned and scoured all of the Orthodox literature on this topic and tried to incorporate all of what I could into this one book so that it's all there.
I love what you said. I think it was at the conference. You said one of your advisors, Roman Catholic, and she's like, why don't you include Roman Catholicism? And you had to like show her that actually Catholicism is not
pre-modern. Yeah, it's not. And she conceded. And she is a credited Thomistic Aristotelian scholar that deals with brain, neuroscience, personhood. So she's a hylomorphist, similar to our take. But when she said that to what you're bringing up, this was during my PhD defense. So I just defended the PhD. They gave me a pass, no corrections. And the Catholic scholar, who she probably understood chapter 3 the most, because the other guys may not have as well, maybe. They're all PhDs. But she goes, well, why do you not consider Catholicism pre-modern? I see that you keep focusing on Eastern Orthodoxy and its pre-modern worldview in comparison to modernity, but you seem to be very antagonistic to the Catholic Church, because chapter 3 is basically me highlighting why we're not Catholic. The whole thing is articulating what Orthodoxy is. And I said, well, given Vatican I and especially Vatican II, I think you would make a hard argument to say that the Catholic Church is not incorporated into a modernist worldview. I would say it has elements of pre-modernity. It has a pre-modern tradition, but it functions as a modern institution. And she conceded that in the defense.
Awesome. Let's go back to this setup here. And so we're going to kind of go quickly through these questions because we do have some super chats. Let me get to those first, and then we'll come back to some questions. What do you see Protestant churches in the future, especially for those who claim to be non-denominational?
I believe all the mainline traditions are going to be gone. I believe in 100, 150 years, Protestantism will be Pentecostalism, and non-denominational Christianity to be very small. Maybe Pentecostalism will be big. It's the fastest growing form of Christianity in the world. When you look in South America, Central America, and especially Africa, because Pentecostalism can incorporate shamanic practices, ecstatic experiences within traditional tribal religions. And so it's very conducive to bringing a sort of Pentecostal charismatic gospel to people that already engage in occult or what we consider pagan rituals.
I have thoughts on all this, but I'm going to be quiet because I want to make sure we get these questions answered. Change your heart and the world around you changes. You don't need to run to a monastery. You can live a holy life, even in 2025, raising a family, working and living normally, because holiness is internal, not external. Yeah.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
Yeah. Nobody disagrees with that. Thank you for becoming a new YouTube member. Great to have you as well here. Thank you for yet another gift of a subscriber. And let's see where we left off here. Let's see this. Can you tell us about these huge, massive data centers that consume excessive resources, water, electricity, and harmful health effects it will do to us trying to open up them fast near our homes? So I think he's kind of answered the question already. Yeah, it's a problem.
It's a problem. And Amazon bought a bunch of land here in Indiana and are building one of the biggest data centers. And yeah, I mean, that to your point though, don't you see the Antichrist spirit already? It's literally draining local resources for people so that they can maintain a room that is essentially black. These data centers, if you were to walk in them, they don't even have lights because nobody goes in them. There's just rows. I'm talking about rows and rows and rows of servers in a big black box. And it's taking up all the electricity and water from local places. Like, you can't think of anything more demonic.
Doesn't that remind us of the Matrix a little bit? Like, just sucking up all the energy from humanity. Father Harris, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Being Roman Catholic, hearing you talk about the beauty of icons, I attended the Divine Liturgy, and wow, glory to God. Love to hear that. That's wonderful. That's one of the main reasons we're here, is to help people come to the faith and embrace the faith. and the Lord. Can I view Babylon as multiple manifestations from the tower to enlightenment, the modern media games, as well as technology development?
I mean, yeah, essentially, just like the Antichrist, there's a typology of Babylon. My argument, and the reason why I titled the book the way I did and used the sort of modern techno depiction of the Tower of Babel, is because this is global. So just like in the localized time of the Tower of Babel in Genesis, yes, that was sort of all consuming for those people. That was kind of the known world. Well, the same thing is being erected in the contemporary period. So the only difference, yes, there's many instantiations of Babylon, quote unquote, but eventually what we're moving is the Babylon, is a return to and Babylon just symbolizes the rejection of God and man wanting to make himself God. And so there is no difference between the Tower of Babel and transhumanism from that perspective. That it is the same worldview.
Absolutely. Is New York City Mystery Babylon?
Well, according to some of our saints, I think New York is Sodom and LA is Gomorrah.
I had not heard that one. Lord have mercy. Maybe that's why I was told that there'll be massive destruction, physical destruction of the coast of America in the coming World War III. Have you heard this?
I have, yeah. And, you know, we talked on my stream this sort of obscurity of Elder Ephraim's statement about the waters and St. Anthony's Monastery. But, you know, I think it was Russia that recently just trotted out that they have a new nuclear capability where they can essentially detonate a bomb in the ocean and cause massive tidal waves. Is it impossible to think that something like that could be used in the, I mean, from my understanding, China is believed to have similar technology. Is it impossible to think that something like that could happen to the Pacific? I mean, I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I'm just saying as a possibility, it certainly exists now.
Yeah, I mean, we're not prophets. God knows what will happen, but there's on several levels. I don't see why we should totally rule it out. Both, not just because it's possible or because there's super evil people in the world, but the spiritual laws. The more I've grown and been a priest now, 25 years almost. What am I going on? 23 years. Orthodox 34 years. The spiritual laws, the way Elder Preface talks about them, when there's no repentance, and this is the wonderful, glorious thing is repentance, how so fundamental it is to the life of the church and so fundamental to salvation. When there is repentance, the spiritual laws are essentially done away with. In other words, yes, we might suffer physically, we might even suffer, sickness or whatever, but the separation from God, which is the only thing that matters at the end of the day, is done away with when there's the forgiveness of sins. Repentance is the forgiveness of sins. When there's no repentance, the spiritual laws are in effect. And the spiritual laws are there to bring us to repentance. Again, even then, there's no punishment, there's only pedagogy. And so when you think about the spiritual laws and you think how much evil, I mean, real evil is in the world today, and a lot of it's coming from America. It's being exported around the world, trafficking, pornography, goes on and on. It is in many ways spiritually a new Babylon. In many ways, actually, you can think about it, America as a new Babylon. What's that?
I was going to say America is the biggest consumer of child pornography as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, I could go on and on, but the point is, if there's no repentance, there are spiritual laws. And so there's no reason why we should, the massive impact of this sin is going to have a massive kickback.
Yep.
It's not going to be like a minor little correction. It's going to come back hard because there's spiritual laws in the world, and just like there's physical laws, right? And by the way, the physical laws are done away with by the incarnation, right? Yep. He became man without a father. So the laws are done away with by God, both spiritual and physical. But when there's repentance, when there's communion, they're done away with, not because there's magic, right? There are presuppositions to that. When they're not fulfilled, then you can expect the laws to be in effect.
And the quote about Sodom and Gomorrah, that comes from Elder Anthony the Russian.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't remember that one. That's amazing. You've done. There's 2 books out, by the way. People are interested in. One is the one, this new version. It's called what's it called?
The Eschatological Visions of the Blessed.
Right, and then the other one that I've seen that needs to be, it's going to be reissued. Was originally titled Nuclear Armageddon, but now it's going to be reissued with another title. Those 2 are circulating. There you go. It's massive.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's massive. It's 800 pages, and there's no commentary. It's just quotes of saints with the footnotes of where they've been found. That's it. 690 pages. I'm sorry, but no commentary. This is just quotations of saints.
Put that up there so we can see the title. Just stick it up there for a minute. Eschatological Vision of the Blessed: End Times Prophecies of Elders and Saints of the Orthodox Church, from Eschaton Vigil, right?
Yes, correct. The Eschaton Vigil. It's a non-for-profit. I work with them, and the whole point of it is just to translate things into English for the first time. So over half of what's in this book had never been translated into English.
Awesome. Is there a correlation between the number of the beast being a human number? Is that number human created technology? Okay, so basically he's looking for the interpretation of the number of the beast, which,
I mean, you would be able to speak to that.
Yeah. It's a name. It's a number of a name of a. It's a name of a man, actually. So it's pertaining to the Antichrist. So I'm not sure if we can say it's the number, that number, human created technology. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be related. The whole mark of the beast, I think, will be related to the advancements in technology. It'll be a manipulation. It'll be a totalitarian. It'll be all that, but it's not going to be only that. It's going to be a subjugation to the Antichrist, and most specifically, a denial of the theanthropic nature of Jesus Christ and his church. That's the key. Like that's the devil wants us to voluntarily turn our back on Christ, right? That's key. And then when we do that, and it's not going to be just like theoretical, it's going to be like in time and space. He wants it like when we're baptized, he wants us to be unbaptized and to be initiated into his church. Like everything is the ape of God. It's just an inversion of whatever God has done. And I go to so far as to say, this is just my theory, but just like the Lord established the church, he established the apostles and the bishops and the diocese. And literally he's just imitating that. So we have, in every generation, we have these amazing saints, just a few of them maybe that are become known to us, maybe more that we don't know, but they reached great heights of theosis and initiation and friendship with God. They have the same thing on the satanic level.
Right.
Then they have the broader, like, disciples of Christ, right? And the serving the salvation of the world, the bishops, the priests, the people who are really struggling. Same thing over there. Mm-hmm. Then you have this masses of people who don't even know what Christianity is really about. They're kind of half in the world, half there, and you have levels of that. Same thing over there. You've got people who are highly initiated into the satanic. You've got people who are real enthusiasts for the fruits of the satanic vision of things. Then you've got masses of people who are Freemasons but don't even know that there is this esoteric side of Freemasonry.
Right. Yeah. Right? It's a drinking club.
Yeah. So you have degrees of initiation on both ends, right? And he's just mocking the Lord with his version of his church.
Yep.
That's how I see it. But I don't know. It's just my theory. So you don't have to accept it. What do we got? How do you become more Orthodox or even just Orthodox at all if you live rurally? Well, obviously you're not going to go out in like the middle of nowhere. You're going to try to be next to Orthodox Church. I don't think I was actually talking to somebody today, but who was I talking to today about this? They were asking me. I said, well, go to an Orthodox church, sure, but try to be at least in the countryside that you can have a garden or something. I think that's not a bad thing. It's kind of normal for most human beings in history. Right. So just it's basic stuff. All right, one more question here. If I'm still young enough, would it be wrong to join the Foreign Legion type of unit to help retake Constantinople? I'm a prior infantry guy and still feel out of place not being in the army. I don't know what that would mean, a Foreign Legion type of unit to help retake Constantinople. I mean, I guess you'd have to go to Greece, maybe. I don't know what that would mean.
I don't know. I don't know if St. John of Atatzis is fully unsheathed his sword yet. So
yeah, I think it's premature.
I mean, if you're able, maybe you join his legion or something like that. But I don't. I don't know what you would actually physically do. Really, if you really want to do something serious, like repent and try to get more people to come to church, that's going to push it back further.
Yeah, that's absolutely. We talk about others not being in the truth. We have the truth orthodoxy, yet Patriarch Kirill says we worship the same God. Is that true? We Orthodox Christians worship the same God as Muslims?
Obviously, I don't believe that to be the case. I know that Russia, I'm not arguing about their methodology, but they do seem to have curtailed some of their Islamic population. They're very pro-Russian. I mean, you can find that in some of the Southern Caucasus regions. But any appealing, do the Muslims worship the Trinity? Obviously not. Do Muslims believe that Jesus Christ is God incarnate? Obviously not. So we don't worship the same God. It's that simple.
Yeah, this is amazing that there's even a discussion. I don't know. This is a sign of the times.
Yeah, I mean,
It really is.
You see metaphysical debates about. I mean, it's very clear cut. Like I don't get it.
Yeah. I want to, before I forget, this is the last question I'm seeing right here. I might be missing a couple, but I think I got all the questions. After this question, I want to make a quick announcement. It's going to be kind of exciting, which I almost forgot to do. Okay, Patrick, how will Trump's Genius Act play its role into all of this? What is Trump's Genius Act? Forgive my ignorance.
I think they may be referring to the $500 billion investment it's called the Stargate Project, which ironically, I did a stream with Jay Dyer on his channel about the 1980s Stargate Project. Same name. It was a CIA project for remote viewers, which obviously we believe that they're probably contacting, demonic entities. Ironically, the same exact name is used for the new AI program to essentially win the AI race. It's called Project Stargate, which again, you could say there's a lot of spiritual connotation. A Stargate, that if we win the AI race, there's a Stargate there. But yeah, there's a $500 billion investment. Trump, and this was my whole thing about Trump, is that there is going to be domestic issues that we would agree with. I believe St. Paisios told us to vote for the lesser of two evils. So we're not political pacifists in a say. We do engage, and obviously with the limited context of a democratic republic in America, yes, I think it's right to engage in that, especially your local elections. Me in Indiana, our sheriff was Protestant, but he was a Christian guy, did not enforce anything in our county. That's important. You can vote for that. You have agency right now, wherever you live in the U.S., to vote for your local sheriff. That's important. But Trump's allyship with Israel, all this stuff is tied together. So his inability to end the war in Ukraine, his flip-flopping on Zelensky one day or the other, I knew that when Trump took office, his association with Peter Thiel and especially J.D. Vance, that what I feared, and I have streamed stating this before he took office, is that they are going to use the technocratic structure in the name of conservative policies. So right now, J.D. Vance, for example, Palantir's watching of everybody of your online footprint and documenting everything you do. He says, well, that's a good thing, because in the future, every person in America will be monitored. We'll be able to know immediately if anybody's in the country illegal. And I already saw that day people in the comments saying, "Oh, that's great. I didn't think about Palantir like that. You're right." And so they're going to use conservative policies, which we would probably be in favor of, to implement the technocratic technology that they want to put in place. And I believe Trump is laying the foundation for that. And at the same time, the Zionist stuff is a big deal, because that is obviously where America falls, according to the saints and the elders, especially St. Paisios talking about Zionism, that Trump has obviously been part and parcel of the Greater Israel Project. Moving the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem had to do with Jewish prophecy, right? That had nothing to do with America's, politics. That had to do with his donor class wanting that moved in the fulfillment of prophecy. Because one of the things you have to realize about Jewish eschatology, which I've done streams on, is that they believe that they can actually make prophecies, like fulfill prophecies immediate. Like they can actually do it in the world. There's not a waiting period. So they can go take Gaza. They can expand Israel. And every time they do that, they're making prophecy occur. And in the building of the third temple, the red heifers, they have all this stuff. So I'm not here to talk too much about, Zionism or anything like that. But in regarding Trump as a presidential leader and his influence on all this stuff, yeah, a lot of what he does is both good and bad. It's kind of God's providence with technology. Maybe we're getting a lot more bad than we are good. But everything that he's going to be building and what he has been built is in a sense moving us further in that direction.
When this election happened, I forget it was the first or second time he was elected, I did a thing on voting. And at the time, there was a kickback like I'm pro-Trump, and it wasn't really meant to be pro-Trump. It was meant to be like vote for the least evil. I see Elder Fem used to say, vote for the one with the smaller horns. And, I like that. And so, or I think maybe it was St. Paisius, but I think Elder Fem said the same thing. But so it's just a question of discernment. There's no political person, power, party that ever is going to express Christian faith, Christian truth. It's total delusional, especially today. And so, it's two sides of the same coin. They're going to serve the establishment. The establishment is well grounded in this foreign vision of the world. Nobody's deluded to think that somehow some politician is going to turn things around. But it's just like, what's the least damaging, basically? And I don't know if maybe they're both going to do this. At the end of the day, they're going to do different damage. So it's like, choose your damage, basically.
Right.
So, okay, last question. And then I got an announcement to make, and then we'll wrap it up. I don't know why this is. I don't know what this question is all about. Can I even go to a roll call church anymore? I have no idea what that's referring to.
I think it's because of Patriarch Kirill's comment on Islam.
Oh, okay.
And Christianity, because they had a military ad. What was it, a year and a half ago, where it was like a pro-Russian military ad, and it began very orthodox, showing churches, showing soldiers with the flag of Christ. And then it also then showed Muslims, and the whole idea was in the Russian military, Muslims and Christians come together to defend, the mother country.
Well, because we have the same God, right?
Exactly, yeah. and I did see the comments of Patriarch Kirill, and obviously that's the official position of the papacy. So,
yeah, look, the error of 1 or 2 or 10 or 5 bishops on their personal, political, or even theological views does not cancel out a local church or divine mysteries or anything like that. So, yes, there's very grievous heresies that the church has to absolutely reject and respond to. But this idea that because a bishop or even a number of bishops say egregious things, therefore I should cease attending my local parish, I don't think that's an Orthodox reaction.
Agreed.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you are indifferent, doesn't mean you agree, doesn't mean any of that, but doesn't mean you equate like these ideas with some kind of undoing of the grace of God, like ipso facto, whatever.
Or nullification of the sacraments. People act like, no, that's not how it works.
No, the divine mysteries are not based on this or done away with because of the personal sins or errors of a clergyman.
Right.
They're Christ given and being given in every mystery. Well, before I thank you for coming on, I want to make an announcement soon. I don't know which day, but it's something that's not in the schedule. So all of you who are following us and following our schedule, looking on social media for when we're going to be doing live streams next, we have the great joy to have on the director of the new film that's coming out, Moses the Black. And she's going to be joining us, I don't know which day, soon, for an interview all about the new film coming out, Moses the Black. And this is Yelena Popovich. She's the same one who, of course, directed Man of God, The Life of St. Nectarios. Mm-hmm. And so this film, the trailer is out there circulating. It's going to be released, I think, at the end of January, in theaters. I've seen some lengthy clips from it that they sent me. It's very intense, very well done. Probably not for children, just so everybody knows. It's very adult, and it's inner city Chicago, but it's going to be a very powerful film for a lot, especially of Black or African-American America. So that's exciting, and something that the Orthodox Church has yet to really touch. So this is going to be a great opportunity for the church in terms of its mission, but also just a great story. And that'll be coming up. I don't know. Stay tuned. Maybe this week, maybe next week. We're still planning when to get together. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I love this discussion. I love your work. I'm very excited. I hope people buy the book in droves and you do more. Hopefully take a couple of these. There it is. There it is right there. And we'll, let me post actually your, where to go right there. David Patrick Carey. Did I spell it right? .com.
That's right.
That's where you want to go. And if you're abroad and you can't get it on his website, then go to Amazon. You should be able to get Amazon, right? Amazon UK, Amazon Australia, certainly. Right?
Yep. Yeah. They'll print them there because that's how they save from shipping cost.
Right. So I hope everybody gets a copy. And then I hope what we can do, maybe you're interested, we can even put a chapter or two on our blog.
Okay.
And people can get a little taste of it. And then they can also, we'll put links and we'll promote it that way. But this discussion has to happen. More people have to be very cognizant of this. It's coming in a big way. And the Orthodox Church has, I would say, the Orthodox Church has the ultimate answer to transhumanism. That's what your point is in the book, I think.
Yeah, that's my point in the book.
Yeah. So it's absolutely true. And so all the more why we need to spread it wide and make many people aware of it. I just go back to some of these experiences like I had yesterday. Unbelievable the degree of delusion in terms of relativism, and nothing matters, no truth, just feelings. I mean, I was shocked how bad it is. And of course, I know, you know, right? But you don't know unless you experience it and you're sitting and talking to people for 2 hours and you're just like, how do I, there's no connection here. You can't talk to these people.
Right.
It's frightening. It's frightening, really. You feel like there's no getting to them because they don't believe in truth to begin with. So that's freaky. That's freaky because it's like it is a part of this whole, worldview that you're talking about, this transhumanist worldview.
Absolutely. And I think as soon as they've adopted those precepts, they're going to be part and parcel of it. They don't have the equipment to say no to it when it comes.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is. And so they're sick. They're very sick in terms of their spiritual outlook and understanding of things. And so they're not going to have the spiritual strength to resist the lies. It's going to be, it's going to be painted as the best thing possible. They're not going to not resist it. They're going to run to it.
Yes.
They're going to run to it and embrace it and say, finally, right?
Yep.
This is the utopia. This is the lie that's coming. So God help us. Thanks for joining us. And everybody go over there and spend some time over there and watching all the live streams over there. Just say it again. You got 2 YouTube channels. You got a website. What else? Anything else we're missing?
Church of the Eternal Logos and Dr. David Patrick Carey. I have a men's only Orthodox community called Logos Academy. It's a philosophy, theology, masculine development community. And then I have a website, davidpatrickcarey.com, that you can purchase some of my products with.
So no snowflakes allowed in that one.
No, it's cool. Like we got police officers, we got power lifters. Actually, one of the gentlemen, Jonathan Newby, is top 10 in the world at strongman. He actually competed for Team USA this year, and he's a devout Orthodox man in Florida. So
do you allow wimpy guys to get in there so they can become strong?
Yeah, wimpy guys are more than welcome. But we do a monthly fitness check-in on physical, whatever your fitness is, right? We don't promote any one. You could be a long distance runner. We don't care. But what's your regimen? Are you sticking to it? Your diet, your spiritual life, which is scripture reading, prayer life, and church attendance. And then whatever career or life goals. Could be making money, could be your career search, could be building a barn in your backyard. And every month we check in the first Monday of every month, and the men, we grade ourselves A through F. And then if somebody didn't hold up to whatever they said the month before, because they have to write it out, we shame them naturally as men. And that's what you pay for, right? You need an accountability group. And so,
no, you're so not modern, man. You're so no shaming. Come on, what are you talking about? We're supposed to be wimpy. Everybody has to approve everybody's feelings. It's
exactly.
It's so good. It's so refreshing. It's so refreshing to just hear like serious people but actually who believe in consequences. Like, yes, there are consequences to your wimpiness. So thank God. We need it. It's good. All right. So we'll be in touch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Father Peter. Really appreciate
it. Thank you. God bless everybody. We'll see you soon. Tomorrow we'll see you back on Thursday for the Mystery of Christ. And until then, God bless.
Extubri matare